Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Can we let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present? And we'd like to start tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd like to join me. Okay, our first item tonight is oral communications. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda tonight. I believe we have 3 speakers.
Yes, we do have 3 this evening. First up is Maria Arntz. Ardence.
Know what to do. Okay, disgusted. Disgusted is the best word that I can use to describe how this community felt after last month's Planning Commission meeting when this commission voted to recommend the proposed Quil Meadows project. Not one person came in support of this terrible project. And most of you were at least honest enough to admit just how terrible this project really is and question the negative health and safety impacts to the community. Yet you approved it anyway. Yes, it's in the council's hands now to follow this, so we'll see how they respond. However, I do want to address a couple things brought up in what I feel were pretty inadequate deliberations. Vice Chair Ryan, after telling this community that it's important that you don't take emotion into your considerations, you express your concern it's not fair to Baldwin that they were last to the game. Point in fact, they weren't last to this game. They, in fact, purchased this property in 2005. Over the course of 19 years, they were approved for both 34 and then 54 single-family subdivisions. But they didn't act. They waited instead, like vultures, taking advantage until 2020 to drastically increase to this monstrosity that we now have before us today. And even if they were last, which they weren't, it's completely irrelevant. Chairman Dalton, you expressed the need for housing. Aside from the plenty of hundreds of rental units sitting empty in this city already, let's talk about real data, not your emotional rhetoric like where are the kids going to live. Based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the average growth rate in the last 10 years in Encinitas, 2013 to 2023, is negative. We decreased 787 residents over the last 10 years. Fact. When you're building thousands of new units, sure, it's going to cause a little population increase, but that's manufactured. That's not organic growth. We didn't need it. You're inviting this growth at the cost and safety of this community. For who? Why? So according to Sandag's regional growth forecast, Encinitas can expect an anticipated 11% population growth through 2050. That's statistically incorrect based on that data, on facts, real facts. By the way, you seem to also disregard there's an important exemption from density bonus projects, specific adverse impacts to public health and safety standards. You appear to only follow law that benefits builders, but disregard the ones that are here to protect our health and safety. Please keep that in mind in the future. Denying Baldwin's terrible, inappropriate project wouldn't have meant that housing of any sort wouldn't have been built. It meant not overburdening an area that cannot safely support such a monstrosity by taking into account safety, health, and environmental considerations discussed that night. You knew that. They should be building something appropriate for that parcel of land on that country road for the safety of an overburdened community, not that obscenity. You let your community down. Actually, one of you tried to do the right thing. Thank you.
Please find a stopping point.
Yep,
Your
I will.
time's up.
I'm almost there. Thank you, Commissioner Prendergast. Thank you for having a spine and trying to do what was right.
Okay, next, we have Lisa Provenzano.
Outreach. Outreach was discussed at the Affordable Housing Committee. It was on another committee that I watched the recording of. And what do you do? Because we don't know the answers to why one developer has Fox Point, Sunshine Gardens, and the new 87-unit development, and everyone calls them a development. So we also don't understand why, though they're not, they don't have to answer to CEQA because they're not a project. But you refer to them as a project. Affordable Housing Task Force refers to them as a project. So you could communicate that to us somehow. You have to do it. You cannot depend on people like us to come here and get information, then pass it on to this person and this person, and play telephone. Anyway, and that development, you kind of just, the 87 units on El Camino Real, if you're coming from the north, there's a median there. No one can make a left into the community. They have to go up to Garden View and come around, and you kind of just swept that under the carpet. I don't know what your discussion in private was on that. The information we get is from the Encinitas Citizens for Responsible Development. Luckily, Dick Stern comes to a lot of things, so he has pretty good firsthand information. The 1% sales tax, there was no way anybody in this community it was not going to get approved. I know people must have voted for it. But because what you're doing with the streets is amazing. You have that back-in parking, the angled parking, where you pull up near the car that you're going to be next to and back in, like no one is going to come and get behind you. It's like on Coast Highway. Those little spots, even though those are pulling, man, if someone's pulling out in front of me, I'm going to stop because that's the only spot I'm going to get. Otherwise, I go down and pay by where Whole Foods used to be. So, but we pay a lot. We pay a lot with our tax dollars for just that street. We're going to have to pay for parking enforcement vehicles, uniforms, office space and supplies, communication devices, license plate, recognition equipment, cash collection and counting, and routine maintenance. Why are we paying for something that's not going to be successful? The roundabout on Quail Gardens Drive, the Lightscape show starts November 15th through January 5th, sold out every night.
Okay, thank you very
And
much.
it's not done because you ordered the materials, but they're not here. And in 10 days, I don't think you could do it.
Our last speaker for oral communications is Dolores Welty.
Good evening. Planning Commission, that's who I'm talking to. I've been listening to one of your last discussions about, I think it was about Tory Crest at the time, and I said something about sewage pumps, and I was listening to your discussion, and when I did, I realized you need some education. So I would like to introduce you to my sewage pump. I will need that microphone and camera. Where's my sewage pump? That's my sewage pump, right there. And I've got a broken chair in front of it, or around it, so you can kind of see how huge it is. This is my garage door, and now I'm going to take you around to the front of my garage. Are these pictures in the right way for you to see? No. You should help me. Thank you. Okay, that's my garage door. And these are my 7 steps up to Sheridan Road. That's why I have a sewage pump. I take care of it myself. I don't clean it or do anything to it. I've had it for 40 years. And it works just fine, except once. When I first moved in, I had a little failure. I'll show you about that, too. And the reason I have a sewage pump is because I'm so far down from the sewage trunk line, or whatever it is. And here's the next one. I'm going to take you to my front door now. That's my front door. I'm standing in it. Actually, my son is. This is the wall that separates, that keeps Sheridan Road from falling into my steps there, my front entrance. You can see the bricks, and you have seen how deep it is already. Okay, now I'll let you see my outlet pipe, which I came out of the front. I'll take you to my front door, actually. You don't get to see the front door. You just see the outlet pipe, which is right there. That's nothing. The outlet pipe is about that big around, okay? And I came out one time and it was wet out there. And I could see there was a slight scent to it. So I
Dolores, your time is up. If you could
Roto-Rooter.
come to a conclusion, please.
But what I actually needed was for the sewage pump people to come out, and they did and took care of it. In 40 years, that's the big problem I had. Anytime you're below the sewage line, you can use a sewage pump.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That concludes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I would show you where you ought to use it on Torrey Pond.
Okay, we're going to address changes to the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda proposed tonight? Seeing none, I'll move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar are items that are considered routine in nature, and they're voted on as one block. Can I get a motion for the consent calendar?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, have a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. Can we call the vote?
I just want to make one point that I was not present at one of the meetings.
Right. Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay, we will move on to our regular agenda items. Item 8A is the Andrews subdivision, case number multi-005053, 2021. Are there any disclosures regarding this project?
I'll disclose that I'm very familiar with the area. It's within my neighborhood, and I walk and drive down this street frequently.
Okay. Okay, and I went by the site, but did not go on to the site.
Same.
Okay.
Did a drive-by for both.
Okay, with that, I will ask staff, Christina Bustamante, to give us a staff report.
So one moment while I get this slide up. Okay. Okay, looks like we can see it. So hello, good evening, everybody. I am Christina Bustamante. I'm the senior planner. I was assigned to review this particular project. I will be presenting this slide deck to you. Okay, the project is for a tentative map, density bonus, design review permit, and coastal development permit to demolish existing on-site improvements and to develop a 12-lot subdivision featuring 12 single-family dwellings and 2 accessory dwelling units. The property has 1 existing single-family dwelling and greenhouses. The structures are more than 50 years old. However, they do not meet the characteristics of a historic resource and do not meet the criteria for local historic significance. Per state density bonus law, by providing at least 10% affordable units for very low-income households, the project can use an unlimited number of waivers and 2 concessions. However, the project is not requesting any concessions. A city is required to approve waivers of development standards unless the waiver would have a specific adverse impact upon health or safety and for which there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact. Specific adverse impact means a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete. This particular project features the following density bonus waivers: private road standards, setbacks, lot coverage, reduction in net lot area, building height, minimum lot width, and minimum lot depth. Landscaping includes landscape BMP basins and trees along Andrew Avenue. The project landscaping includes drought-tolerant species and native plants. The project exceeds the minimum 1 tree per 1,000 square feet, which would have required 37 trees, and will install 112 trees as part of the landscape for the development, and demonstrates consistency with the landscape design matrix. The project is providing a pedestrian connection from Hiia to Andrew Avenue along the west side of the project. The Encinitas Municipal Code, Section 30.54.030 requires parking to be provided at 2 spaces per single-family dwelling and 1 additional space for each dwelling that is over 2,500 square feet. 10 of the single-family dwellings will be over 2,500 square feet, with the remaining 2 single-family dwellings measuring less than 2,500 square feet. The project will provide at least 2 parking spaces within an enclosed garage and at least 1 non-enclosed parking space, for a total of 3 parking spaces for each single-family dwelling, with most of these lots providing more parking than what is required. The proposed project with the conditions, sorry, I missed a page here. Per Encinitas Municipal Code, at least 1 parking space shall be required for each accessory dwelling unit unless it has a quantifying instance, such as located within a half-mile of public transit. In this case, the project is located within 1/2 mile of public transit and is not required to provide parking for the accessory dwelling units. However, the project is providing 4 on-street guest parking spaces. The project is demonstrating compliance with the development standards for required parking. And I want to take a moment here just to kind of look at this slide. There are 12 lots that you can see before you. I highlighted in yellow here along the westerly side the pedestrian connection, which is the sidewalk provided from Hiia to Andrew Avenue. The 2 accessory dwelling units, if you're curious where they were, they are on lot 6, which is here. If you can see, well, you cannot see my cursor, depending on your eyesight. But lot 6 here is about 3 in from the top. And then lot 8 has the other accessory dwelling unit, which is about 4 lots in from the top, if you're not able to see my cursor there. So just wanted to take a moment to point those things out to you. Alrighty. And the proposed project with conditions incorporated is consistent with the goals and policies of the general plan, local coastal plan, and demonstrates compliance with the applicable sections of the Encinitas Municipal Code and City of Encinitas design standards and guidelines. The findings can be made to support the approval of the design review permit and coastal development permit. No evidence has been identified to demonstrate that the granting of these permits would have an adverse impact to health, safety, or significant adverse impact to the physical environment. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project based on the findings and conditions contained in the attached proposed resolution of approval. The applicant team and I are available to answer any questions that you may have. This concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the staff?
I have one question.
Okay.
So can you go back to that very last slide?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it this one here?
Yes, so you mentioned the 4 off-street parking spots. So what about that space that's next to the green space on the front, at the very front off of Andrew? It's in gray. Is that also a parking spot? In one of the other
Let me go
documents,
to this sheet here.
it shows
Yes.
a car there.
Yeah.
So would that actually be 5 off-street parking spots?
1, 2, 3, 4. I think this one here, you're correct, is a parking space, but
Oh, it's mailboxes. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. That was my question.
Bob?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I just had a kind of a couple. So the current zoning is R3, right? So 3 units per acre. Can you walk me through the math that goes from 3.1 acres times 3 to 9.3 units, but it rounds up to 10? So how does that math work in the planning, in the staff report?
Sure, excellent question. Let's bring you guys along. Here we are. So here's the screen here. That what you're seeing on the screen is the calculations that were used for density bonus. And so it's an excellent question. We get the question often. So for density bonus, we go off of gross acreage. In this case, it is 3.12 acres. 3 dwelling units per acre is the standard density for this zone, as he mentioned before. So you get 9.36 dwelling units. With density bonus, you get to round up. And so that gets you to the 10 dwelling units. Does that answer your question?
It does, and then later on in the document, you mentioned because they're doing a density bonus, they get an additional 32.5% because they're having 1 unit that's very low income. So that's a qualifier to get the 32.5. So that math is 10 times 32.5%, which is 10.3, and then or 13.3, then you round up to the 14 units that they're eligible to create, right?
Yes, that's correct. So just so that the crowd can follow along here, this slide that you see before you is essentially the calculation that Mr. Prendergast verbally said to you. And so what you're seeing here is from the previous slide, the 10 dwelling units per acre. The 3.25% of increase comes from the government code section. It is not our local city code section. So then that qualifies them to have 3.25 units in addition to the 10 that they're allowed. So that brings them to 14 units that they could have had on this particular property. They chose to do 12, which is less than the maximum they could have done. So hopefully this illustration and the conversation we've had has helped clarify those points.
Thank you, it did. Appreciate that. It's always a question that we have on net versus gross. It's always come up on the density bonus sites, and I think it's important also to note here that the planning department provided the code section for the state of California. So these are code references that we're following, not opinions. There's facts in coming up with these calculations. Thank you. That was kind of one. Can you bring up the one map that you had of the lots and it showed the DG path that went through? That was a good, from your report, that was a good map. Yes, perfect.
This one here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a gate that's going to be at the end of the cul-de-sac. Living in Levenheim, we have a lot of emergencies at times, and there's a gate at the top of Cali Margarita that allows us to exit out of Lone Jack if there's problems going to the south. We go to the north and we exit Cali Margarita into the Carlsbad Ranch subdivision. How is the gate monitored, and what does the fire department do when there is an emergency to open that gate?
Yeah, sure. So that is something that fire regulates in standard, and so there's standards to follow on how an emergency access gate operates. Typically, there's an Opticon box somewhere that's visible to that particular fire truck, so when they roll up to it, they have a special device that can activate that and open the gate so that they have access. So does that help answer your question?
It does. So it's not a key lock. It's an electronic box that the device goes, okay, well, I'll have to meet with Fire Chief Gordon and talk about the Cali Margarita because it's a key and people don't have the key in an emergency situation. So I just want to understand that we're providing an emergency gate, that the technology is now changed, and I can address that with the chief, fire chief. Thank you. I guess that's, just go down a couple here. On page 8 of the staff report, it talks about the VMT, and that the VMT, this is on page 8 of the report, traffic study. And we've gone back and forth over the years as we start to transition from using average daily trips as part of your calculations to VMT. So just like some clarification on how, because this came back to the parking ratio and the location of the site within half a mile of a transit, so they didn't have to have a certain amount of parking. So how does the VMT calculation work to further the discussion that they don't have to have a certain amount of on-street parking, or how does that factor into the calculation? Because there's some concern about overflow parking to Andrew. And so I just want to understand the traffic consultant, if you could interpret the traffic consultant's analysis for us on that.
Sure. So I do have some information on that. So there was a traffic consultant that essentially did a focused local transportation assessment, and they determined that the project is not required to prepare a full local transportation assessment since it's consistent with the current zoning. It generates less than 1,000 daily trips and would not add 50 or more peak hour trips in either direction to the existing roadway traffic. The project consists of redeveloping the existing site and include 12 single-family residential units. The project is forecasted to generate a net total of 106 daily trips with net increase of 3 a.m. peak hour trips and a net increase of 5 p.m. peak hour trips. All intersections in the study area are expected to operate at an acceptable level. And I think that's probably the synopsis. I could get into additional detail, but I will leave that to Matt if you want to go into more detail.
I think the net is, because it's within a half a mile of a transportation node, is kind of one qualifier. And another qualifier is the amount of trips under the current general, because I think there's a statement made that the number of trips does not trigger any additional work, and it's consistent with the general plan based on the number of units that are being developed. I guess it's an affirmative. It's a rhetorical question or statement. Needing an affirmative from you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So you might be referring to the city's current adoptive VMT guidelines, which were adopted in November of last year. However, this project was deemed complete prior to the city adopting those guidelines. Therefore, it's not subject to those guidelines, so the half mile from transit wouldn't apply. What the city did use prior to adopting its own VMT guidelines were the San Diego ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineer guidelines, and that's where you get the ADT thresholds of 1,000 ADT. The city's current policy, though, is 110 ADT for VMT screening purposes.
So under the new guidelines, would it have been triggered at all?
It would, yes.
It would have.
It's over 110 ADT.
Okay.
I just have one follow-up regarding the pedestrian path between Hiia and Andrew. While the vehicle path is emergency and gated, the pedestrian path is not gated. Is that correct?
That I'd have to defer. I want to look at the plan here. Let me also bring that up for you to see as well. And then slideshow from this current slide, so it gets bigger here. So number 5 here, we've got a fence and gate, so there is a small pedestrian gate there.
Unlocked gate?
That I'll have to defer to the applicant to know.
Thank you.
And then if I may, my apologies. So the ADT with this project is actually at 106 ADT, which is under that 110 ADT threshold. So it would be screened out of the city's current guidelines.
Right, so it qualifies either way, either on the old guidelines or the new guidelines.
Correct, yes.
Could you clarify which transit stop is within a half a mile?
So when it comes to the city's VMT guidelines, major transit is defined as only the coaster station. So anything within a half mile from the coaster station would be screened out. However, when it comes to parking, I believe, and I may defer to planning, that bus stops may be included within that buffer.
Yes, I believe you're referring to the accessory dwelling unit parking requirements, and that is according to bus stops, so any form of mass transit. So that's a little bit different than other screening criteria.
Okay, thank you. Can you also, while the site plan is up, which unit is the affordable set-aside unit?
Sure. So that's going to be Lot 3, which is, for those of you who cannot see my cursor, it is 2 lots in from the bottom.
Thank you. Bob, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, I think I'll save the rest for deliberation. Those were just clarifications from staff. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Oh, Susan, sorry.
So I had a couple questions. The affordable unit is Lot 3, and it has also has an ADU?
It does not.
Okay, so the ADU is on which lot?
Sure. Lot 6 and Lot 8. There are a total of 2 accessory dwelling units for this project.
And are they both affordable or one?
No, so there was a memo provided to the Planning Commission. There was a small text update that was done to delete that there are no affordable accessory dwelling units proposed for this project.
Okay, and then I have another question. So there are 26 trees removed, 112 new. 10 of the 112 are under HOA care. I noticed there were 9 street trees shown on the landscape plan. I'm not sure, but would those 9 be those HOA care trees, or where's the 10th tree is my question?
That I'll have to defer to the applicant to know.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can
not
wait for
sure.
that question
Yeah.
for the applicants. And then I have just one more question. Actually, it's for the applicant as well. Sorry.
Okay. Is that it? Okay, thank you very much. If the applicant is here, if they'd like to make a presentation.
And if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to bring up their slides as well. They had some slides they wanted to go through.
Thank you. Pleasant to be here. Susan, we'll have to refer to the plans, but I believe those are in the BMP area, the trees. And that's why they would be part of the HOA, but we can look into the plans further. We don't have that at the top of our head.
Okay, so slideshow is up. You should have a clicker there to be able to move around the slides if you'd like.
We have 3 slides, so we're not going to take too long. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the Commissioners, City, and all the participants here. It's been quite a journey. This started in 2020. I think we've had 4 planners, 3 engineers. Anna stepped in a little in COVID time and did some COVID things. But the project has changed a lot in the last 4 years. We had a significant reduction in ADUs, a significant increase in parking, significant change in the architecture, and we feel like we have a great project, and we're happy to be here today. One thing about us is we have a real pride in the legacy of our projects in Encinitas. Our developers, and we've worked here over the years and feel we bring a unique perspective to Encinitas. I think it's important to say the 3 primary people on this project live between half a mile and 2 miles of this project. Our offices are between a quarter mile and 2 miles of this office. Each of us drive on La Costa every day, and one of us drives on Andrew every day. One of the reasons we're so interested in this property is because of its proximity. and because of its location. And that's one of the reasons of the care we have brought to it. We think it enhances the local context. We had opportunities along the way to pursue significant density, which we did not pursue. You saw in our density bonus application, we could have put 2 more houses on this lot, but we felt like that this was more consistent with the character. We also think the homes are great for a growing community. We have unique sizes, square footage of homes. We have single story, we have multi-story, and we think it's really fits the need of young families, retirees, and those within the community. Couple thank yous. First of all, thank you to Christina. Since she came on board, it's been a pleasure and really helped us make some improvements and get us through the system. Thank you to the Brown Studio and to a number of our other consultants here today. Lindsay Brown, principal, is here and will be available for comments later. Very active in this project. I think, a couple things I would say. I know a number of the questions are around parking, and we did significantly change parking from our original CPP. In fact, I won't go into all the details, but 6 of the properties have 3-car garages and 3 spaces. This is in addition. This is concise and not including the additional neighborhood spaces. So we tried to hear community feedback. We did not ask for a waiver regarding parking, and we actually beat what code is required for this site. So we did try to listen. I think with that, I'll end with our presentation. I'm sure there are plenty of comments, and there will be plenty of questions from both the commission and response to applicants. So we'll be happy to come back up. But thank you for your time, and thank you for consideration of our project.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions of the applicant?
Well, I did have a question about the pedestrian gate and whether
Yes.
that's going to be a locked gate or an unlocked gate.
We are open. It was not specified in the plan, so we would be open to the recommendation of staff and the commission on that. We've heard from multiple people, there's benefits each way, and so we're open to guidance
All right,
on that.
thank you.
Susan?
So I was curious, when I looked at the elevations, you have different colors and different facades, and for some reason, on the south and west facades, you show some very dark finishes, which I was curious, why would you put dark finishes on the surfaces that have the most solar exposure?
That's a good question. I think we thought that was good with the design, and that was what we chose. I don't think we particularly looked at the solar exposure on it. A lot of materials today are more hardy to the sun.
Okay, Bob, did you have a question?
I think I'll wait till the community speaks, if they're community speakers, and then ask the applicant to respond to the community, and then I'll have some for him afterwards.
You have just shy of 7 minutes remaining if you want to come back after the public comment.
Super. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you have a question? Okay. Okay, how many speaker slips? do
We have 6, and a few have time donations.
Okay.
First up is Adam Miller with a time donation from Aaron McGillen. Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. I've got some audio or video to show as well. But as we get started, my name is Adam Miller. I'm a longtime resident of Encinitas. I've lived here for over 20 years, and my home is right on Hiia Avenue at the very north end terminus where the pedestrian gate is that we're talking about. The adjacent property to Andrew Street is a vacant lot, and then my house is the next one to the south. West side of Hiia, just so we're oriented to where that is. Currently, there is also a large drainage outflow on Hiia Avenue on the east side of Hiia. Any rain event that coincides with more than about 1/3 of an inch leads to dramatic flooding on that street, and I'll show you that video if you're ready, Kieran. This is the right-of-way that we were just discussing. Did anyone have a kayak? Yeah, it's hilarious if you're not living there. This will take 15 minutes to start doing this with any type of rain event over about 1/3 of an inch. This is a property directly adjacent to the Andrew Street development. My property is just right there to the south. This is my house right there. You can see that's basically Lake Elsinore. Again, hilarious if you're not living there, but my house goes underwater. It's flooded multiple times. It's cost close to $100,000 in damage. Can I pass a hat around? Can you fast forward a little bit through this, Karen? Because I'll show where this water is coming from. It is coming from a city-owned, if you go to the next one, you'll see, a city-owned, unmaintained outflow from water that's coming from Hillcrest Avenue. This has been here since before the city incorporated. Pause it, yeah. So any rain event, this went on for, if you remember in August with the Hillary, 24 hours straight. Had the water not been going towards the development and working with the developers to ensure the flow there, my house would have flooded yet again. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage are being done because of, let it run now, please, Karen. Again, an unmaintained outflow drain that is basically collecting, concentrating, and distributing environmental wastewater onto Hiia Avenue and leading to severe flooding of multiple properties. My ask today is that you strongly consider what is going on this street as part of this plan. Ensure that the grading at the right-of-way terminus grades north towards the lagoon where this water wants to go, and ensures that this water is adequately taken care of to go into the proposed drainage that's included in the Andrew Street Development Project. Or take it the other way to the Shea property at the south end. But leaving this water completely unobstructed like this and leading to further damage is going to plague this development and this street for years to come. I encourage you all to think about, if it was your house, what you would do, what action you would take, and whether you would just say, it's not mine, I don't care, which is what has happened as I've stood here before in front of the city council, spoken to Jill Bankston, spoken to Tony Krantz, spoken to Bruce, spoken to Allison. Multiple times I've stood in front of city council, infrastructure meetings, et cetera, for requesting, begging, pleading for help, and have been left completely underwater. I'm done. Thank you.
Next, we have Francis Walters, followed by Scott Campbell.
Where's Mr. Applicant? Oh, what's your name? Scott. You're Scott, okay. Hi. I have a real problem from the Zoom meeting that we had with, I think it was you. They said that the first set of houses were going to be the two-story, and then as you go around the cul-de-sac, everything was going to be single-story. And now that I look at the new drawings, everything's two-story. My neighbors, they're looking into our lives back there. I don't like that. I feel very misled. Everything was seemingly okay after that Zoom meeting, but the two-story, there's too many two-stories. That it was such a lie. So from that meeting, let's see, privacy with the neighbors. We tried to be thoughtful with our design and have many one-story houses proposed. Privacy is important to everyone, and the goal of our project is not to maximize the square footage of our homes, but have a thoughtful, livable design. We are so upset about that. The number of pools related to water scarcity, noted. We have a California-friendly landscape plan and approach to water usage, but they're pools. I mean, we have a water shortage. There's way less ADUs than that was started from, they were supposed to be 12 ADUs, now they're down to 2, but I think they've made the homes way bigger than they told us they were going to, the houses themselves. I don't know how Palm Spring Modern fits in, but whatever. The trees. So if we're going to have all these two-story homes, there. At least they could put the trees, they all look like they're in the front of their cul-de-sac trees. Maybe they need to put them towards the back so we have some privacy for our little single-story homes that are going to be on view of everybody. And then this parking thing, it's a nightmare there. There's a house across the street from me that's being redone, and the parking is just terrible. And those construction workers, the way they tear out of there, just tonight, I was coming home late, and Anyway, I'm just not all that excited about this. I knew that there was going to be development back there, and we're real okay with it. And I'm glad it's not big, huge apartments. But you really need to look at this design. Our backyard flooded really bad this year from the last bad rain we had. So I agree with, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but the flooding is a problem there. We had to go back in the nursery area and dig out and put sandbags and be diverting all that water. So really look at this grading. Flooding can be a problem, and parking's going to be a problem too. Andrew is a nightmare with the speeding cars, and it just, and then all this getting around Sacramento laws.
Next speaker is Scott Campbell, followed by Susie Chateau.
Okay. That's always the best part of this whole thing. Okay. A little bit more. Okay, good evening, Commission. Thank you, Ryan, for bringing up the park or the walking path. Hopefully we can get something better than the secret path. So I'm here to actually talk about something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about drainage. I'm going to double down on what the previous speaker said, and I've seen this drainage up close and personal in the summer. I've seen this. Last summer, I saw this happening. And so here's a picture. This is from our map, our city map, and it's pretty much showing what's going on. You were looking at what are we going to do with all that water? And my ask is that you ask the planners and the developers if this water was accommodated. I know they're talking about BMPs and collecting water, but we just need to know that this water is actually accounted for and will all be collected. This is a close-up of that same property during a dry time. It's a bunch of dirt. You know, if we have a walking path, are we going to do something better than just dirt and mud? And on the lower left, that little hole, that is the drainage right now. And it's non-functional because it's a dead greenhouse and they haven't maintained their BNP path. It's pretty bad. Do the plans handle existing flooding? Now, here's a close-up from the hydrology report, page 97. And if you look really close in the center, underneath the red line, it shows the arrow pointing to the south. That's an elevation arrow. It was the drainage intended to not go. Now, there's another page on there that shows something about a PVC pipe. I think the people in the audience would like to hear a little bit more about this and make sure that this is actually going to happen. Now, this is from the city site, and it shows the existing drainage patterns the city has established. This old school Decadia. We use backyards. There's people in the audience right now that their houses they have those red lines in their backyards. The existing drainage goes down let's just call it the east side of the property, but now it's going to go down where that driveway is. It's going to go on the street, and then it's going to go down the south side, which it's going to be much more water than that south side currently takes. So right now, I'll go major bet that probably very little to any water actually comes off the property because it's all dirt and it all absorbs. But with all the hard pack and everything, the drainage patterns are going to change. Now, once again, if those little strips along Andrew are going to accommodate all the water, that's fantastic. But if not, we need to know how much. So I got one more page, and I'm going to ask for a time donation from Sandra Anderson, but I'm only use probably about 20 seconds of it. Earlier this year, we did a Leucadia drainage thing, and it had storm models, 100-year and 5 years. I took some screenshots. I'm sorry, the resolution is so poor. But you can see in the area where this drainage is going to come off of the property, it really doesn't change much between the 5-year and the 100-year. So we need to know that if the existing capacity is sufficient. That's a real thing. Now, conveniently, if you look up there, you can see this huge puddle next to the La Casa 48. We should probably looked at that back then, but that's past and they're litigating and all that kind of stuff. And one last thing, a previous speaker talked about sump pumps, and I hope you got her point was we are tired of these pad elevations when sump pumps are perfectly fine. Use the existing land and stop changing the land heights. And that's all I really got. Just please address the drainage issues. Thank you.
Hold on a second. If I could just clarify, the water that we saw in the video earlier is flowing on Hiia towards this site?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so it's not flowing from this site down Hiia?
No, but that one picture shows the grading arrow, and I'm not a land manager, but I can see the direction of arrow shows it actually pointing the wrong way, meaning the water's going to collect right there, right now.
Okay.
So that's an issue.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
I'm sure these gentlemen in the audience can address all this, and I hope this can be resolved positively. This is my main concern.
Okay, we'll get there.
You're going.
We'll come back to you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Susie Chateau, followed by Dolores Welty.
And I can certainly donate my time as well because you've actually answered most of my questions, but I do, and maybe I should address you, Scott, about the lighting, because we all like to see the stars at night. Do you have a plan for the lights on that property? So I can, that's really my only question.
Okay. We appreciate your brevity. Okay. Dolores?
Yep. Here I come. Dolores Welty, Sheridan Road, and I thank you, Scott, for tying me in to this drainage problem, this problem that we have with grading. There is this particular property has a 3-foot slope, I think, from south to the street, or rather from, south to Andrew. Is that correct? I ask for grading plans, but I don't get them. Anyway, it's pretty level, and it drains to the street. And I don't think they're going to need any sewage pumps because Andrew has a sewer collector that they can connect to. And the reason I told you about sewer pumps is because when you grade and pile up the fill to make a lot higher so you can have gravity flow, and you get rains like this, that dirt moves. As we had a bluff collapse at Bataquitas because of that. 10-foot fill on a lagoon-facing lot, on 2 lagoon-facing lots. And when the rains came in January, and it was only a 2-inch rain and some fraction, when it came in January 22 and 23, that dirt began to move. And because the bluff slopes to the west and the dirt was piled up here, all that dirt began to move. And the adjoining house has a 6-foot fence. That dirt moved. It came over that 6-foot fence. I'll show it to you next week. And it drug a trench out to the lagoon. We have 1,687 cubic yards of dirt lost in that particular rain overnight. So it's very important that you think twice before you think, oh yeah, gravity flow. Oh yeah, we got to pile it up here so we can get those gravity flows and don't have to have individual sewage pumps. Now, I'm not talking about runoff here. I'm talking about grading for gravity flow for sewage pumps. It's the same thing. It's piled up dirt. Thank you.
Next, we have Ruth Hyman. Following Ruth will be Dennis Caden and John Ryder.
Hi, thank you. I actually live right across the street, so it's going to be a much more beautiful view than what I'm looking at now. My concern was, though, I like all the trees in that BMP, but I was hoping there'd be some parking out there, just because I know on our side of the street, there's always parking, and there's a DG walkway from Sheridan to Willstone. And when we moved in, we signed something saying we would, as homeowners, maintain that. But people always park on it. So I didn't realize I was signing off to pay for a parking lot. And just to give an example, like last year, the rains just got out the DG and if cars are on and such, and break the barrier between in spots and the grids under. And we got 3 bids, and 2 were $5,000 to $6,000. And the third one he wouldn't bid on because he knew it wasn't going to last. And then we had an angry neighbor come who lives west of us to ask us, can he pay someone to shovel all the DG and gravel that the storms took down the road that were supposed to be in front of our house to bring it back. So I guess my concern is, if there wasn't going to be more parking, and since people tend to walk down the street in Andrew, it seems a safety issue, because there's not really room to walk on the walkway all the time. So if that walkway is really meant to be a walkway, which I forget his last name, but a long time ago I talked to Steve in engineering, and he said, yeah, the cars are supposed to park partway in the street and partway on the gravel, but if they could put up signs or something. And again, it's not just that I mind looking at a car 14 feet from my house window, but in the winter, just the wear and tear. And if we don't run out there and put a diverter or something, we did have flooding right up to our doorstep within an inch. So, and if you can't do it the whole street, at least from our driveway to the front of our house, so that we won't get flooded and not have to pay such high maintenance. Or if there is more parking out there, is it something that the city would take over the maintenance on that area?
Could you clarify for me, you live across Andrew from the project site? And are you, I would say, the western portion of that side, or the eastern portion?
Yeah, the western.
Okay, thanks.
So, and it looks like the walkway you guys have, is that concrete or DG in your? Okay, yeah, it's the DG stays if it's level, but if it's when it rains and there's a slope, it's.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our final 2 speakers are Dennis Caden and John Ryder.
Good evening, commissioners. A couple of things. First off, the gentleman who spoke about the flooding, and in our general plan, I think it's in the land use element, policy 2.1.3 says that you should ensure infrastructure is in place prior to approving projects. And so whatever you can do tonight to assure that happens, that would be fantastic. The other is dark skies. Although Leucadia, when we did the general plan, O'Livenhain got dark sky status because people started for the first time building tennis courts with the And so just because it's written in the general plan that applies to O'Livenhain doesn't mean that Leucadia kind of got dark sky status because of the Bataquitos Lagoon. So anything in your power to keep dark skies in Leucadia would be fantastic. Affordable housing units, I see there's just one. If there's anything you have in your power to negotiate with the developer to increase that number, maybe to 2, because we are in big trouble. Tony and Allison say we could be in very big trouble here in the near future. So let's take their word for it and maybe offer free permitting or supplement a building or ask the 1 unit to become 2 smaller units. And the last is just a personal thing, because I tried looking up that policy 2.1.3 on the general plan. If you could recommend to staff that we improve the documentation of our general plan. I know if you guys go online, even, I don't care how big your computer is, it is the worst presentation of our general plan I've ever seen. So get them to fix that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Our final speaker is John Ryder.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Brief background. I'm on Paxton Way, right on Andrew, or should I say Freeway Andrew. Chris Ryan, I'm not sure where you are in that area. And then the traffic guy, there's some reality to this because the stop sign on La Costa, everybody redirects down Andrew. And there's times where I'll walk into a car as it's coming down because you can't walk on the sides because of everybody's parked. My question, Scott? Okay, so with the DG pass or wherever you have, they're going to park on the path. They're not going to park half in the street and half not. When you do have people down there working, you can get one truck down. That's it. People with carriages, dogs, and whatever else, they're not going to make it. We really need to take a look at the traffic safety on Andrew. I've asked for stop signs. I asked for speed bumps. I'm hoping to get them. I keep asking. I keep hammering Ian and everybody else. The other thing, some of the people who live off of Hiia or not, Willstone, trees, Scott, on the fence line, if you can put like portocopis trees on the fence line on your area, that way that gives some type of protection to the houses. Some of the people were asking about that. And next thing is, will the power lines be underground or are they gonna be above? And can I get your card for future questions, please? Okay. Again, it's all about safety for Andrew. It is fast. They don't stop to stop sign. They come down, slow up, and they spin the corner pretty fast. Desiree chases them down. That's Desiree. You probably know who she is. She chases cars down all the time. And I step into the car's path, I look for the mirror, and I stand there with my shoulder. I mean, I try to get them to slow down. I had one kid slow down, give me the eyeball, hit 50 plus up the hill, spin around, come back, give me the eyeball. Lucky for me, his mom found out about it and grounded him. So yeah, that's the biggest thing we have right now is going to be traffic and where are the gentlemen going to park when you start doing the work. Paxton Way is not a place to park. Side streets aren't going to be the place to park. On your Zoom call, if it was you, you did say on site. So hopefully that's still going to be the same thing. All right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's it for
Okay,
speakers.
that's it? Okay, if the applicant would like to respond to anything they've heard?
Sure, I think we have 6 things. I'll respond. And can I just ask my team to stand instead of coming up? If
They'll
you can
need
hear
to
us?
come and speak into
Okay,
the microphone
okay.
for us.
So trees, we got one of the best landscape architects we could find. Some of the trees has to do with the drainage, which I'll touch in the other thing, but we tried to be consistent with that. Power lines, we have some underground power lines requirement in there, so we'll follow all those. Lighting, we're trying to be minimal. We don't have any street lights, I believe, in the plan from a raised perspective, and we want minimal as well. We want to be safe, but we don't want to light up the whole neighborhood either. So that's lighting. Street parking. Do you want to just explain the? And so what we did is we followed the city guideline. We followed the city guidelines with the DG to be consistent with the rest of the neighborhood, and just explain our park.
Yeah, Justin Suter, civil engineer, 119 Aberdeen, Cardiff. Yeah, so the DG sidewalk is actually raised from the road and the parking area with a 6-inch curb. So for someone to park in the DG, they would have to mount the curb, which is certainly possible, but that would be possible on any sidewalk. So I think to the extent possible, we've designed that in a way that clearly separates where cars should be and where people should be.
Can I make one comment real quick? You're getting confused. The problem we have is the GG side pathway that's on
Existing, are we talking existing or with our project?
Existing, and the problem is because of you don't have enough parking spaces, people will park along the front and block the pedestrian path.
Hey, we can't hear, nothing will be recorded if you're not speaking to
So
the
we'll just
microphone.
say, I would just
Thank
probably
you for clarifying.
say for now, we follow the city guidelines. It's consistent with the street. We tried to put in a curb to mitigate those issues. There is not a consistent sidewalk all the way through Andrew, and we do recognize it as a cut through, but that's something our neighborhood will have to deal with as well. I think that's it. Okay. On as far as the heights and the stories, I apologize. We did not commit to having all 1 stories. We have 3 1-story, and they are all on the western portion of the property, which we felt the neighbors had more than the eastern. The eastern houses are risen a little bit and doesn't look in the backyard as much. So we put 3 1-stories on the west side. And we also have 4 partial, what we call partial 2-stories, so predominantly 1-story footprint, and then an elevated like office or something in there. So we did try to accommodate that. I think most of the other developments that are coming under plan are exclusively 2 stories. And then on the drainage, we could talk about drainage all day. Adam and I have had lots of talks about it. You know, we're not happy with the drainage. The drainage is, I would probably say, at least 100 yards away from our property. We should not have to be dealing with it, in our opinion. And we have sent videos to the city as well. We are not happy with that. But because of that, we have done significant revisions to the plan, both the BMPs in the front and a drainage all around the back. We totally reworked it to take on some of this additional flow that we do not think is our responsibility. So we're putting significant investment into the community to fix something that we don't think should have to be our property. It's a city issue that comes all the way down to our property. Just because we're the newest person on the street doesn't mean we have to fix, everything for the neighborhood. We're more than taking care of the water that's coming on ours, and we've given up significant square footage on the property to accommodate this above and beyond what would be traditionally expected from a neighborhood of ours. So we have serious concerns with it. We hope it is fixed, but we are confident that our plans with the city have significantly mitigated the issues.
Just to clarify that point, you're comfortable with the amount of water that you're aware of that's on Hiia, that your project will either transfer it or handle it, prevent it from entering? I mean, you're addressing
I'll
it
ask
on...
Justin to come back up for the specifics.
If you look in the conditions of approval, I think it's engineering special condition 7. It specifically talks about that we will work with the city engineer to analyze the exact amount of water and convey that through our property via an open channel facility.
There's a ditch, it appears, on the south property line and the west property.
Yes,
Is that part of the
Yeah, that's
conveyance?
kind of paired with that condition of approval. If you look at that portion of the plan, you read the condition of approval, that's what that's intended to address. We just we negotiated the condition in a way that allows the city engineer and I to continue to sort of evaluate what's happening on Hillcrest and really understand that water. But as Scott mentioned, that water really has nothing to do with us other than it ultimately gets to our property. We can't solve sort of the bigger regional issue that was brought up tonight. But what we can do is make sure that we don't create any sort of barrier or dam that prevents that water from continuing. That was you're talking about on Hiia? Yeah. So that was a previous plan. I think the plan that's here before you tonight shows the water continuing onto our property.
So it's graded to the north then? Is that what you're saying? I haven't seen that.
Yes, it's graded to the north. To the extent the water gets to our property today, we're going to accept that water and pass it through the site. We are not going to try to divert that to I guess that'd be the west, which I think was one of the earlier questions. Yeah. Yeah.
But for public comment, we would love that water not to come to our site.
Right. There's a bigger regional issue that goes way beyond our project.
Just for your clarification, I will note that on the site plan I'm looking at, that arrow is not there. It's not pointing south anymore. So.
Is it pointing north? Or
There is no arrow.
called out at all what the grade is?
No.
Okay, so again, we don't really know that.
I just want to be clear, we're kind of into a question and answer, not necessarily your time limit. So and if you were done with your response, I do have a few clarifications.
I'm done with responses. Happy
Okay.
to answer additional questions.
Could you clarify for me, are the pools part of your proposal, or are those a private improvement that future homeowners would potentially put in?
I think they're part of the proposal. I mean, we envision them being kind of wellness homes so it's in the conditions of the
So
plan. But we could theoretically not build the pool.
Okay, so not, all the landscaping shown on the landscape plan is proposed to be installed by you, not a future homeowner?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant? Susan?
Well, I just want to be sure I understand this drainage issue. It sounds like you're going to increase pervious areas in some ways because you're removing the greenhouses and the existing single-family residence and roads, but you're adding impervious surfaces with these 12 new dwellings and a new private road. There are no mature trees being added, correct? They'll all be new trees?
I mean, they'll be at various stages
There'll
of
be
maturity.
new small trees,
Yeah, I mean,
right? And so you're adding a significant number, 112. But it sounds like the drainage pattern that's existing, it's coming from Hiia, and it's running through that site right now down to Andrew.
No,
correct? That's the existing drainage pattern in the
again,
hydrology
I
report.
don't really want to hijack our presentation on a neighborhood issue, but no, our drainage does not go there. There is an existing condition 100 yards away that happens to drain on a very small portion, the south portion of our site that we have taken square footage away from our project, installed a completely new plan to try to accommodate, but that is not flowing from our site in any way, shape, or form. We're treating something that you can see a storm drain that is over 100 plus yards away from our site. I want to make sure our presentation and approval focuses on ours. We are treating it, we are doing something, but this is a city issue.
Understood, thank you.
But there is an existing drainage problem at the Hiia, the east end of the site.
Not from our site.
Right, it's not
Doesn't flow
from
our
your site.
Yes.
But it currently could flood your site because it flows from there,
Potentially.
from the south,
Potentially,
east,
yes.
and it goes towards the northwest, according to your hydrology report. And so what you're doing on your site, you're going to mitigate with these bioretention type systems. Is that your plan?
Yeah, Justin, would you say yes? Yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah, do you want to
Yeah,
just
come on.
address that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, earlier, we kind of launched right into the off-site drainage condition. But yes, on-site, any increase in runoff that we generate, we will mitigate that water through stormwater treatment facilities. So any water that's related to our project gets collected, treated, detained, then released. This separate issue that we're talking about is simply us doing our best for a neighborhood problem to collect that water and convey it through our site to Andrew.
And so that's going to flow surface drain?
Yes. The grades are very flat in this area, so it's difficult to put the water underground because there's nowhere for it to get out, if that makes sense. So in those flat areas, we have to keep it on the surface to discharge. There's not a lot of storm drain infrastructure in this part of the city, unfortunately.
But it isn't being generated from your project.
That's correct.
It's existing at the Hiia side, southeast.
That's right, and it's actually being generated over a fairly large section of Leucadia. I mean, we've gone back and forth with the city engineer, but anywhere from 5 to 8 acres of area drains to that outlet structure that Mr. Miller showed. Again, completely
But you're going to protect your project
Yes,
from that overflow?
that's right.
Until it's fixed, which it will be soon.
Wait, not to beat a dead horse. So when it goes down the westerns, I have an aerial up, so I'm staring at the aerial, and the water gets delivered from the mistake that to the
Mistake
south.
on the lake?
Yeah, the mistake by the lake, Lake Elsinore. So it's coming along the western side of your property. When it gets to Andrew, which you've been able to divert it, is there city infrastructure available to handle the flow that the neighbor puts? So you appreciate the fact that you've helped the city divert the water around your property, which you don't have to do. You've conceded some property to be able to do this. Now you've done it, and you've put it on to Andrew. And it's not your problem, it's the city's problem, and maybe the city can answer the question. What happens to the water at that point? Is there infrastructure? I know you can't fix it, I'm not asking you to, as a professional, if you feel like answering, what happens to the water when it gets there?
Yeah, once it's in Andrew, if you look at sort of the global topography of that area, it would continue westerly to Vulcan.
Got it.
You know, the track, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
where.
yeah, as an engineer, if
That's
you
where
guys
it
wanted to
goes.
hire me to master, yeah, we,
No,
we could do the whole,
I was just trying to get an understanding after we dealt with it. Just, you delivered it great, now the city has it, and that's probably a question for the engineers as part of this project, is like, okay, now what? We've got.
I can tell you, having done projects in Leucadia for 24 years now, I mean, it's an ongoing challenge, right?
Sure.
As Leucadia redevelops, you know, where and how do we convey the water is a question.
Ongoing.
Yeah, exactly, and it will be.
Appreciate that, thank you.
So the existing sheet flow would be there no matter what you already have on that site. And right now, you're not mitigating the stuff that's coming from Hiia end, but now you will be.
We are mitigating our site runoff. We are not mitigating off-site runoff, which would not be typical.
But that off-site runoff is going to come to your site unless you protect from it.
Yes, we're collecting and conveying it. I guess it depends how we're defining the word mitigate, but we're collecting and conveying it. We are not doing any sort of mitigation for it.
And I would say the typical developer response would be to wall it off and make sure it doesn't get on our site, which we're not taking that course because we're trying to be good neighbors in a real neighborhood problem.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the clarifications. One more, sorry.
Appreciate that you gave us as much detail as you did. It's just, I want to be sure I really understand.
Hey, it's a good issue.
Solar panels? Yes, no?
We're plumb for them, like according to code. I'm not an expert on solar panels, but we're expecting them.
I just didn't see any on the plan,
It's
so
not
did I miss them?
I don't think it's a contingency of the plan that they must contain solar panels, but they'll all be installed for that, and that's the foreseeable plan.
Is that code?
Without being-
So-
New development?
So solar panels is something that would get enforced by whatever the California building codes are at the time when they submit for building permits.
Right.
And so if the California building codes require solar, these homes will be required to install solar.
All right, I just didn't see them on the plans. All right, don't go yet. Let's see. Are the driveways permeable? I saw there was I forgot which page it was, page 17 of attachment 19, which was the project plans. Project PC 19 showed
I believe we have permeable
C1.
strips. I believe they're not fully or non-fully permeable. I believe we have permeable strips in the driveways.
So you'll have runoff, so you're not contained, and it goes to the biobasin. Could you do more permeable, or just chose not to?
If I understand correctly, and shake your head no if I say this wrong, it's mostly permeable with concrete bands to hold it in, I think we may have confused that a second ago
Okay.
and said it the other way. Sometimes you see lots of concrete with just the permeable band, we're the other direction.
Got it.
Lots of pavers, a little bit of
A
concrete.
little bit of concrete to keep it.
Yeah,
let it
yeah,
soak
it
in.
actually,
Okay.
it holds it in nicely.
All right.
Yeah.
That was, because C1 wasn't as clear as part of your plans for that. Will any of the fences exceed this? Are you asking for any waivers on the fence heights? Are everything at 6 feet? And is 6 feet the correct city code for fences? Just to make sure I know.
Yes, you're correct, Commissioner. And right now, there are no waivers being requested for the walls and fences proposed.
Okay. I did want to applaud you on page 22 of your site plan and this landscaping. You're putting in great native trees as much as the other gentleman suggested. Podocarpus, those are the worst trees of all time. Right there, right up there with the ones that are downtown that have all the root structure issues. But they are putting an amazing amount of, the Ficus benjamina. They are putting an amazing amount of multiple oak trees, all native, I think 4 different kinds. I thought that was awesome. There are 36 boxes. I think code is 24-inch. I'm glad you're putting 36. Love you to put a bigger one, especially behind, or consider alternatively putting some more mature trees between you and the neighbors, especially on the 2-story houses, and especially the one by the pool. So I don't think I can dictate where you put your tree, but I would hope that you would be considerate of the neighbors. I can't stop you from building 2
Yeah, I
stories.
think anytime we do a tree study, we do the
You did a
minimum
great-
that we will commit to, and the hope is always that
You did
we
a great
do-
tree
we
study.
do more.
117 or 112 trees is amazing. You're doing 76% native, and the code is 50% native. The fact that you're putting the various agrifolias in, I think, thank you for that. I think thank you for the landscaper for suggesting it and for you doing it. A couple of bigger trees along the way because they do grow slow. I don't think you have any sycamores. Those tend to be a little bit faster growing, but I appreciate you guys doing that. I guess we can get into questions on the articulation. I'll leave that for you.
Yeah, let's keep
Yeah,
that for
these-
deliberation. If there's
Yep.
anything.
No,
you're-
I had traffic study, parking, consistency. I just want to make sure I have the developer questions.
I thought you were about to make a motion.
Oh. No.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
And thank you for all the consideration for the neighborhood. Could I ask about the connection to Hiia and the gate for the vehicular traffic? Was that a decision that you made for any particular reason, or was it city requested?
I would say multiple reasons. I would say most of the community requested it wouldn't because it would bring more traffic on to Andrew. So that was a primary reason. I think the second is we're a private development and we're not a through street. It's not an existing through street, but we wanted to be meet the code and be amenable to emergency situations. So that's why we decided to go with the emergency Knox box with going through the site.
Of the applicant, not deliberation. Okay. One of the correspondence to the city as part of the correspondence that got submitted to us talked about the current condition of the property, that there were standing water, there were gnats, and there were bugs. And are there any plans, can you address some of the concerns of the existing conditions, or is that?
I'm gonna look at Adam. So
is that
I mean,
something
I think
that-
I can say this, right? I mean, we helped put a channel onto our site that we shouldn't have done to take some of that water. So
Right.
I don't think there's any standing water that's from our site. It's all coming from the neighborhood.
Okay.
So I mean, we could board it back up, but
No,
then
no.
it's going to flood Adam's house. So I mean, we're trying to work with it, but no, it's not. We don't have a lake in the middle of the property, if that's what you're asking for.
These guys have been awesome. If it wasn't for them, my house would have flooded last August, January, and February. 3 massive flooding events. And I've said thank you to Scott and Eric and this team multiple times. They've been phenomenal. And I think for as much heat as these guys take for developing, there's a lot of developers out there. These guys live in the neighborhood. They are looking down on these sites. This stuff's all going to get developed. These guys have been phenomenal. So I'm just going on record saying I'm very appreciative of what they've done for me and for.
Okay, thank you.
They didn't need to. Thank you. I'm good.
All right, thank you very much.
No, I have a
one
question.
more,
Sorry.
sorry.
And it's regarding the pedestrian walkway between Hiia and your street, leading to Andrew. And you said that was a question that was up in the air still. And I'm just wondering what some of the considerations are, because I know that the one gentleman lives there, on Hiia, but living in the neighborhood, this would be a very important neighborhood connectivity point for us. We do have what we call the Bougainvillea cut through, which is on Willstone, and it's another street that can, another pathway, you probably know it, right? Do you know it?
Yeah, I was just saying, and Anna or Christina can answer.
Yeah.
There's some confusion on what the city code is on this sort of walkway. We're open to both. Some people in the city want it, some don't. Some people in this room want it, some people don't. So our idea was to get it approved with the gate, have some flexibility as things uncover. We'd have the ability to go in multiple directions of what makes more sense for the community. That's our idea.
Right, I would just
We're
ask.
not adamant on.
Right, I would just ask, when you're making that consideration, to think about the greater community as well,
Yes.
and not just those who live on this street and the ability to walk through, because for someone who lives in the greater Leucadia community, I do walk this neighborhood frequently with friends and with dogs, and having the ability to take different paths and walk through on different streets is really important to us. So to any extent that this can be a gate that's accessible for the community, I think it would be fantastic. I've never seen anybody abusing the Bougainvillea cut-through path in any way or causing any kind of problems for the neighbors that live on the two sides of that gate, which is a gate that can be opened. So that would be my suggestion, and my hope is that if there's any way to keep that connectivity and make another point of connectivity in the neighborhood, I think that would be really fantastic.
And I could speak to, just from the municipal code, it does say that connectivity to the greatest extent feasible. And then there is also a resolution that speaks to citywide pedestrian connectivity. So from a planning perspective, yes, that's something that we desire, and we're okay with that as well.
Thank you.
Now.
I hate to say it, but I think you're done. Okay. I'm going to close the public portion of this meeting and open it up to commissioner deliberation, please. Any initial thoughts, Brent?
Initially, I had some concerns just with the vehicular traffic that seemed to be building a nice roundabout for the planned project, yet leaving the community next to it with a tight dead end that has no turnaround. And now, considering there's some drainage issues, it seems like just some general improvement needs to be, on that end of it. But again, not part of this project. So, outside of that, the parking seems to be adequate for the residents. But certainly the community seems to have some concerns about overflow parking along Andrew, as well as traffic flow. And I think that's certainly concerning. But I don't think more could be done to provide more parking in the area.
I looked at the driveways, and I think all except for Lot 3 have driveways that are longer than 20 feet that you could park a car in them, right? So given the number of 3-car garages with potentially 3 cars parked in those driveways, there's a tremendous amount of parking provided for each of these houses, exceeding what the minimum requirements are. So I think these houses are providing as much parking as any other single-family house is in our community. So I'm not as concerned about the parking. I get it that it can be tough on street, but I don't think these houses are going to generate that on-street demand. They all have 3-car garages and big driveways that can fit a car in them. So. Anyone else?
We'll go up the queue. Generally speaking, it's a good project. I wrestle a little bit always when the affordable lot becomes the smallest lot. And the waivers requested by the developer, there are 7. And one of the waivers, or a few of the waivers, are lot sizes. And so I always wrestle with this when a density bonus project comes up, or whether it's a PRD like we had on another project. They make all the small houses really small, then make all the other lots really big. Now in Sanctuary, they were all fairly even in size, but they're specifically asking for waivers for about half the lots, and they're making those small, and they're making the other ones bigger. So they drew the lines where they wanted to, and that's fine. They have the right to get for the waivers, but if they weren't doing the density bonus and they were just doing 9 units, they wouldn't. So asking for 1 extra unit is allowing them to get 7 different waivers. That's the law, I get it. I'm not an architect, but clearly squeezing the affordable units in lots 1, 3, 2, and 4, making them so small and all the other lots are really big, yeah.
I kind of appreciate that there's 4 houses of the same size. One of them is affordable, but the other 3 are also just market rate houses that.
Yeah, they're just
like within their own complex, there's a variety of people that may afford a smaller home and those that are wanting the larger home. So I appreciate it's not just the affordable house.
I do too. There's at least 3 others. So 3 times the amount of the affordable. There's 3 other houses doing the small one. But they're all small, and they're asking for waivers for all of them. So if they weren't doing the density bonus, they wouldn't get the waivers, and all the lot sizes would be more consistent, and the houses would be just fine. But that's the law. Yep. So, but generally speaking, he's done a lot with the trees, which I'm super happy of. I think he's done a really good job of laying it out. I understand there's some changes from the original CPP to what people are seeing now. It's probably something I'll do in the work plan. But generally speaking, and he's been accommodating to the neighborhood so far. I think the path cut through is very interesting that Commissioner Ryan talked about. I think that's a general community, and it sounds like he's open to it, so I'd be open to putting that into a resolution. I like that. And then I probably have some questions on the articulation and the architecture that we can get to in a minute, but generally speaking.
Okay. Susan, any?
Yeah, my biggest concerns have been addressed because I was concerned about the drainage. I thought if they were making that situation worse for the locals, but instead it sounds like they're improving it.
Yes.
And I also was concerned about their increasing the amount of runoff to Andrew, but they're using biofiltration. And it sounds like they're addressing that pretty well. So I think it's a pretty nice project.
Yes.
I would recommend they look at those colors that you apply and be a little more smart about how your solar is going to irradiate the buildings. Otherwise, I think it meets all the objective design standards, and staff recommended approval.
Yes.
And I concur.
Okay, thank you. Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Sure, I do. So I actually think it's a nice-looking project. I'm familiar with the area, as I've talked about, and I just drove around the area again today, and I do see a lot of the architecture here that reflects architecture that's already in the area, too. So I think it kind of coalesces nicely with the neighborhood. I'm very excited if that pedestrian walkway does go through, and it is a gate that can be opened. So to connect for the neighborhood connectivity, I am a little dismayed by the size of the low-income unit. So I do need to say that. I do think it could have been bigger. I understand business reasons for not doing that, but it is definitely the smallest house in the neighborhood. And while I appreciated Dennis Caden's idea to make it 2, I mean, it's pretty small already. That would be two very small houses, 2 much smaller houses. So I do think it should be 1. But then I have to look at it on the other side it is smaller, so it will cost less, and so maybe that makes it even more affordable because it is it's 3 bedrooms, so because it is even smaller, maybe it's even more affordable. So I have to kind of look at that both ways, the size. But I don't really have anything else to say about it at this point.
I like the project. I think they've done a tremendous job, as we've already reflected in a lot of the comments, that they've exceeded the landscape requirements for trees. They've gone heavy in the native trees. I appreciate the architecture is contemporary, modern. It feels like it's very, there's a lot of variety in it. I mean, I don't see the same floor plan being stamped down across this. So there's a very high sense of customization to each of these units, and I think that's really going to benefit the neighborhood. A lot of the concerns I've heard expressed seem to be neighborhood-wide concerns. I don't think this is the project that's going to solve the drainage, the traffic calming. All those are legitimate concerns, but I think outside the scope of this project, this developer seems to have shown a very positive desire to work with neighbors and address those issues, particularly the stormwater, even though they're not his issue. So I feel good about it. I'm not concerned about the waivers. I think that's kind of par for the course. As we have a code that outlines much bigger lots, and as we do have to fit more and more houses in, those are the setbacks and stuff like that are going to adjust. But these still all seem like, well, they're not attached, right? And there's still 10 feet side yards, and that's consistent with a lot of neighborhoods in our community. So I would support the project. I am a big believer in connectivity within the neighborhood, and I would maybe support a motion that put a condition that no gate be added to the pedestrian crossing. And I think we ought to look towards a motion on this since we like so much about it.
I have one more question to put out here. Did we hear from them that the construction equipment will be staying on the site during construction? Was there any provision for that, any condition about that?
I don't think anybody's allowed to shut down the street without a permit to do so.
Well, the Goodson project is parking across the street, so they're not on site. Is there a
We're not talking about the tractor, you're saying the employees or the laborers' personal cars.
That too, and there's also tractors being parked across the street in the Pepper Tree lot, and they drive across the street. So there's a huge, massive lot, but that's not this one.
That's not a private
I was
lot.
going to say, there isn't any place for that to really happen here. There is no
There is
empty
no
lot
extra,
across
so
the street.
yeah, you're right. There's no place to put it. You're right. I understand.
Yeah.
I also have a comment about the wording in the staff report that I'd like to address.
Okay.
In the where is it? I gotta get to it real quick. Sorry. Hang on. Too many technologies. Bear with me. I get all flustered. On page 11, there's a statement on the staff report of the local coastal program consistency. So let me get to that. Let's see, get the right page here, page 11. So the sentence reads, the project complies with the standards of the R3 zone, comma, except for the density bonus waivers, and is consistent with the policies of the city's local coastal program, including general plan and municipal code. I'd like to suggest that we change that to read, the project complies with some of the standards of the R3 zone, because, and that would be consistent with then page 12 under findings number 1, page 13, and then also in the resolution, because without the waivers, it does not comply. So it complies to some of the standards of the R3 zone, but with all the waivers, it doesn't comply with the R3 zone. So a simple change to some of the standards of the R3 zone I'm more comfortable with versus the implicit statement that it complies. And I don't think implicitly that it does comply because there are 7 waivers to the zoning code.
So I would argue, grammatically speaking, that you don't need the word some when you have the word except, because it's basically saying the same thing in 2 different ways. I think that the sentence makes sense because it does say it complies except for. And
but it doesn't comply.
But the except goes, it modifies the first phrase. So
I think it's
I think that grammatically speaking,
it might be
this says the
grammatically
same
correct,
thing.
but I think the first statement says the project complies, and the project does not comply.
It's not a sentence. It's the first phrase of the sentence. So if you read the sentence as a whole, it tells you that there are exceptions that make it, that these are the exceptions. So
I
I'm just saying
disagree.
if you take
I
it
think
as
it's
that sentence.
I think it's unclear. I think it infers that the project consistently complies, and it doesn't. It only complies because of the waivers, because of the state density bonus law. It does not comply with our city code.
I tend to follow with Chris on this, that it's one sentence that says, except, it's identifying those things that don't comply, and that they're using the waiver to do that.
Well, then you have to go find all the different waivers. So
Is the result different? I mean, if it says.
I think it means the reader sees here and in multiple places, including the resolution, that the site complies.
Except for those waivers.
You have to read the except for, so why not be more clear and say the project does not comply with existing R3 codes?
But you're reading the entire sentence.
Yeah, of course I am.
I do want to just clarify one point, that there are standards in which they are complying with, except for those.
That's right.
that
That's
are
why
being-
it complies with some of the R3 zone. I didn't say it complies all three except for. I'm saying it applies to some. Doesn't comply to all.
If I may interject a little, or maybe offer an interpretation to the word some, for the way that it's written to say some, it becomes a little more ambiguous. Whereas the way that it's written right now, it's saying, hey, all the development standards that are typically required of a project, they are meeting, except for the things that they're allowed not to meet with the waiver allowed through the density bonus. So I think the way that it's written is more precise than if we were to just say that there are some standards that it's too vague, in my opinion.
I think it's ambiguous to say that it complies because it doesn't. The explicit statement, the project complies with the standards of the R3 zone, begins the intent that it does comply. And I don't think that that's where I want to go. I want to say that this project does not comply with the R3 zones only because of the waivers.
What if you just added that at the end of the sentence, including state laws, something like that? That would cover your density bonus law?
Or you could say, except for the density bonus waivers, the project complies with the standards of the R3 zone and is consistent. I mean, you could put the except at the beginning of the sentence.
Yes.
That's just another way of looking at it.
I just think it's a tone, and it sets the tone for the reader. And you're right, it might be grammatically correct, but I don't think it is the intent. The intent is they're only getting this because of the waivers. And I think it's important for a reader to see that the only reason that they're getting all these things is because.
Support that kind of transparency.
I just think you have to read it all the way through. It doesn't affect the transaction. It doesn't affect the vote. But it means that when someone reads this, that I think that they see that this is an exception to the code, not complicit with the code.
I'm failing to see the distinction or the importance of that tone in this report.
I think enough people have come through enough projects upset that, we say that it's compliant with the code, and it's not. They're only compliant because of state law. They're only compliant because they've asked for waivers. The setbacks, the lot widths, the heights, all the waivers that people are asking for are only acceptable because they're using state density bonus law. If they had to build to the city code, they could only build 9 units.
Okay. So I'd like to.
I think that this is a really good point. I think that a lot of our residents are upset with having all of the density. And the reason they're upset is they feel like they had a bait and switch sort of scenario that we're not transparent. If we can be more transparent.
I don't think this is going to clarify that, but I'm going to make a motion to approve the project with 2 conditions. One, there's no gate on the pedestrian link at Hiia, and the suggestion that we reword the language of that provision to say, except for the waivers, the project complies with the R30 overlays, or not the R30, the R3 zone.
There are a couple other places that it would be made to be consistent down below.
I'm going to have to leave. I'd leave it to staff to.
Yes,
I mean,
it's fine.
You know, I don't want to be up here wordsmithing every aspect of the document. If there's a consistency aspect, I'd rely on staff to go make sure it's consistent throughout.
I'm fine with that.
And if I may, we will change it in the findings of the resolution, which is the document that makes
legal.
this determination. And so we'll go through that resolution and make sure that that reference is reversed in how it's said as stated. And then I know that we have drafted a condition of approval based on what we've been hearing, and so I'll ask the attorney to read that off.
So this language would be a proposed new number 2 under SCA condition of approval. It would say the pedestrian walkway connecting Andrew Avenue and Hiia Avenue shall be open to public pedestrian access. No locked gate or other installation shall block such pedestrian access.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Works for me. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. No further discussion. I'd call the vote. Okay, that project passes 5-0. Congratulations. Do we need a 10-minute break? Anyone? Okay. I'm going to adjourn for 10 minutes, resuming here at 2 minutes before 8.
I appreciate that. Yeah, well, it looks like it. You got my next door. According to what I've been told and what I remember, it's great. It's not R3, it's R2. It's R15. To a certain percent. Right. But, you know, they got us. Now he's just But it's going to be 3 stories. Yeah. That's going to be interesting. Yes. Oh, you think you're good? Yeah. Well, I did. Then I got lucky. Okay, very good.
I would not know.
I'm trying to. They're very nice.
Okay, I'd like to get started again, please. Okay, the next agenda item on our agenda is item 8B, the permit parking zones amendment. This is Abraham here? Is that perfect? Okay. If we could get the staff report, please.
Good evening, Chair. Abe Bannigan, City Traffic Engineer here. We're here tonight with our consultant, Dixon Unlimited. This was a project that we received direction from the City Council to hire a consultant to revise our permit parking program chapter of our municipal code. Dixon Unlimited was hired, I believe, late last year, I want to say. And they've been on this for the last several months, and we've had 2 community meetings and a Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission meeting. And we have been here tonight from Dixon to present to you. This draft report was included in the agenda package, and Ben will present the item. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks, Abe. My name is Ben Verdugo. I'm with Dixon Resources Unlimited. We are a parking and mobility consulting firm. We do a lot of business in the state of California with municipalities, and so includes a couple of our neighbors to the north up in Carlsbad and Oceanside, doing work with them right now. So today I'm going to present to you what we're working on with the city of Encinitas with the residential parking action plan, talk about the project itself, and then draft recommendations. There we go. Thanks. So as everybody in this room mostly knows, especially you all in the audience, there are 4 current RPP zones in the city of Encinitas. The most recent of which was established in 2021, Zone D, via Molina. I think most of them are here right now as well. And so we're looking to really codify and get a standard procedure moving forward with how to operate the entirety of the program to make it future-proof and to really incorporate a way to establish a good methodology moving forward to how to get this program where it's been somewhat fragmented but have a real policy level and move forward comprehensively. In terms of the project timeline, as Abe said, we've been working on this since early 2024. We conducted project kickoff, had initial site assessments, reviews with staff. Moving into spring, we had our first community meeting. And then at that time, we submitted an online community survey. And so we got quite a bit of responses from residents in the city of Encinitas about residential parking. Moving on into summer, we drafted the initial rounds of recommendations, held a second community meeting, met with Mobility Traffic Safety Commission, got a lot of good feedback from that commission, but also residents as well. And then here we are now. So we're going to provide a few updates to the recommendations. The idea is to get in front of City Council at some point. We were hoping before the end of the year. But I think we'll work that out with Abe, and then we'll come with the full recommendations and then having municipal code updates ready to go for approval. So as I said, during the first community meeting, we also released an online survey, which we had a total of 612 total responses. And I'll go over a few of the responses. Won't get too much into the weeds about it, just the general responses that we thought was interesting. So of the respondents, most respondents do not live inside a residential permit parking zone, which goes to tell you that there's a lot of interest for people that aren't in zones right now. It's going to be a hot topic coming up over the years, especially with development coming through to Encinitas. So it's really important, and it was good to see and refreshing to see that people outside of existing zones actually were involved with the survey. All survey respondents who live in an existing RPP zone reside in a single-family home, so meaning nobody that took the survey within a zone lived in multifamily development. In non-RPP zones, some respondents reside in multifamily dwellings, but the majority reside in single-family homes. Residents living in an RPP zone typically own more vehicles than those who do not live in an RPP zone. So, for instance, 25% of those living in existing RPP zones have 4 cars. Residents in both RPP and non-RPP zones find it most difficult to park in the evenings overnight. That's a really obvious answer to that question. I speak from experience. I don't live in an RPP zone, but yes, there's challenges parking overnight. Non-RPP residents generally have an easier time securing on-street parking or do not use street parking at all. And there's also a relatively even distribution of residents in non-RPP zones who believe that there is a parking issue in their neighborhood, almost 50-50. But residents who do not live in an RPP zone generally do not believe their neighborhood needs an RPP program. We also received a ton of correspondence, emails from the community. Common themes within those emails include quality of life as a qualifying metric for the establishment of an RPP zone, making guest permit process easy to use, instituting good neighbor policies, include long-term caregivers into the RPP program, and then also issues with multifamily complexes contributing to the lack of parking supply. So the next portion of this brief presentation is we're just going to go over some proposed strategies, and these strategies are based upon a ton of community feedback, survey results, but also best practices with what other California cities are currently doing. Also notable, we did present this to Traffic and Safety Commission. After some of their comments, some of the community comments, we actually added a few more into the updated report, including definitions, quality of life explanation as it relates to the RPP program, but also some color related to private development parking impacts. So talking about the potential strategies, first of which is really clarify the intent of the RPP program by allowing all residential zoning districts to be eligible for an RPP zone. So either single family or multifamily, all eligible into the zone. And then we also concluded that the existing RPP zones, A, B, C, and D, will be grandfathered into the updated program. Also introduce RPP zones experiencing external parking demand. The way they're supposed to be set up is really someone coming into a commercial area, they park in a residential area, that's going to be an issue. Also looking at neighbor cities, what kind of impacts do they have? Schools, institutions, as well as recreational facilities. We also want to establish right-sized permit zones by introducing minimum zone size requirements of 1,500 feet, which is approximately 3 blocks. There are a lot of cities that don't do this the right way, where they just might have a block of an RPP zone. What happens there is their problem gets pushed off to the next block and to the next block. That's not what we want. We want to have a pretty comprehensively sized RPP zones. Good example of that is Zone D right now. It's a pretty good sized zone, and it captures a pretty wide swath of people that can actually apply and get a parking permit. Another strategy is to include RPP petitioning and study guidelines. So the way it should be set up is if a community wants to get into an RPP zone, they have to circulate a petition, and the petition has to achieve 51% or more signatures, which should be followed by a parking occupancy study. Now, if it reaches a 70% occupancy or more in a proposed neighborhood, it becomes eligible for an RPP zone. And then from there, City Council will consider these findings as they evaluate and vote on the implementation of a new RPP zone. Other strategies include the prevention of oversized vehicles from program eligibility, limiting permits to just 1 permit per eligible resident, and a max of 4 per household, and also introducing an escalating rate structure to permit fees. For example, first permit would be $25, second $50, third $75, fourth $100, with the idea this graduated process would maybe dissuade someone from wanting to buy permit 3 or permit 4 due to the cost. We also want to introduce, which a lot of cities are doing right now, a low-income parking permit, where maybe the first 2 permits would be free, permit 3 would be $25, and permit 4 would be $50. Another big one, and we can't stress this enough, is enforcement really should be outsourced. We know that the Sheriff's Department is spread pretty thin in terms of resources. They're trying to manage City of Del Mar, City of Solana Beach, City of Encinitas, Rancho Santa Fe. Last thing they want to do is write parking tickets. And we hear that from municipalities from all over California, which is why a lot of municipalities are actually outsourcing parking enforcement as well, so that just makes sense. Another strategy would be to implement an automated permit management system. This is where if someone is in the existing zone, they could actually log in to the city website, and then a dashboard appears. They can actually upload all their documentation, but they can also enter their license plate. And what happens is their license plate is actually their permit. And so the way that works is enforcement is using LPR, license plate recognition, right? So the camera's on a LPR vehicle. All it has to do is scan a street. And instead of someone actually looking for, a hang tag or a sticker, it automatically picks up who's paid or who hasn't paid. Also, a good thing about that, if it's outsourced as well, the city can actually retain that revenue, and so that can go back into the program. You really want to have a cost-neutral program. You're not there to make money. You're not there to be punitive. You really just want compliance about people actually following and obeying the parking rules. And so I think that's another really important step the city should be taking. And then finally, really considering future developers' role in the implementation and management of new RPP zones. I think a big issue that we've had, particularly in Zone D, is the fact that we have these big apartment complexes and they're charging $100 or more for parking on off-street. And a lot of the people that are living within these complexes don't have a lot of money. And so instead of actually paying for $100 a month for parking, they're going to park on the street. And so it's really about having these conversations and having the city having these conversations. I mean, taking a partnership approach with these multifamily developments, just because it's really unfair to price out parking that high, and it's really going to affect on-street parking in the neighborhoods that surround that. So that is a brief presentation. I have all my information here. Most of you probably have that and have emailed me already, but feel free to take that down, and I'm ready for any questions you have.
Okay, are there any questions?
I have a question. So I have a question about the parking fees. Is that an annual fee?
Annual fee.
Okay.
And I would say it's kind of low, but we have a comparable analysis of what we've provided within the report. It's kind of standard compared to Southern California cities, Northern California cities. They're much higher.
So I have a question about that, because obviously if this is supposed to be cost neutral, you'd need to have enough people purchasing these in order to cover the cost of enforcement.
Correct.
So I'm sure there's math algorithms for that. So would those math algorithms be something that would be presented to City Council to make a determination as to whether or not they were going to allow one of these parking zones?
Yeah, and we can look at existing permit holders and take that number and take the graduated rates and look at how much potential revenue they could be making. Also, citation revenue could also be captured. And so between the citation revenue and the permit revenue, you can combine that to be able to afford outsourcing enforcement.
Are you able to predict citation revenue?
That's tough to predict. I mean, we can predict that, and we can give a range of predictions based off of compliance. But that's something, to your point, we can provide that to City Council based on, we can do financial projections on that as well.
Okay, and what about projections for, I know you need to have 51% of the residents in the zone sign a petition, and then the study's done, and there was the 70% number. That was the capacity? Something about capacity?
So the 70% number, so the petition would trigger what's called occupancy study.
Okay.
Right, and so if it turns out that on the street, 70% of vehicles are occupying the street or more, that would trigger a council review of that, and then from there, they can make the recommendation to approve a zone.
Okay. So can you predict, I know even though 51% of the people in the neighborhood have said that they support permit parking, that doesn't mean that 51% of the people in the neighborhood will participate.
That's a good-
right?
yep,
So the question then goes to, how do you predict the number of people in a zone who are going to purchase them and how many?
That's a good, well, so I think the best way to predict that is to look at the current economics of it right now. And all four zones right now, we can look at how many permits are out there right now and make projections based off of the status quo right now, what that would cost to run the program, how much revenue we can receive off that program, and we can make some assumptions about enforcement as well.
Okay, I want another question, sorry. Another question is, you know, a lot of our communities are near the ocean, and there needs to be access to the beaches, and the California Coastal Commission requires that there be access to the beaches. So would that prevent one of these parking permit areas within certain zones? Because if you permit out people who are visiting the ocean because they don't live close enough to walk or get there some other way,
Right.
then does that trigger other laws? that
Well,
would prevent
it might trigger a review by coastal, right? And so we could cross that bridge when we get to it.
Wouldn't you want to get ahead of that instead of crossing it when you come to it?
That's a good point. We have worked with coastal and a couple other municipalities, and that's what you do. You get ahead of it, you tell them what you're going to propose to do, and then you try to get on a hearing. So yes, that's a good point. We would get ahead of that.
Those were great questions.
Thank you.
So if 51% of the people out of 100 say, I want to do it, but only 30% of the people sign up for it, but the city now has a contract with XYZ enforcement company, but only 30% of the people are paying for their permits. And at the same time, if 30% of the people have a permit, is it effective to make it an RPP if only 30% of the people are supporting 100% of the area?
That's a good deliberation.
Yeah. No, that's great for the city council to talk about. So guests get a parking pass. So I have a parking pass in my house. So if my mother comes, I give her a pass, and that's what she puts on, so she doesn't get a
So
ticket.
it wouldn't be a physical pass. So the guest pass would be set up similar to a standard pass, where whoever has a standard pass at their house, they have a login credentials, and they can actually allocate guest passes to, say, if your mom's coming in town, your relative's coming in town, all you have to do is plug in their license plate,
Right.
and that allows them to be a guest at your property.
But I already have 4 people. I already have 4 permits. So what allocation do I have to put?
So that's separate. So you have four permits for residences.
Okay.
You can also have an allocation of guest permits. Some cities are doing up to 3 guest permits, and
Per
that could be
car.
transferred, per car, and that could be transferred. Say if your mother-in-law's coming in town for a week, she gets that guest pass for a week. But you still have, once that's done, you still have 3 guest passes to use for the remainder of the year that you can reallocate to someone else.
And how much would those guest passes cost?
That's still up for debate, talking internally with the city.
Is this just overnight parking we're talking about too?
Yeah, well, it depends. Because on Zone A, that's during the day, right? And the other 3 zones are overnight parking. So it just depends on the need and what the paid parking zone area would be, right? Because you could have a parking zone next to a school. That's not going to work overnight. It'll work during the day, right? And then you would have it just during the day. So you can have day-only parking zones, nighttime parking zones, or 24-hour zones. It's just up to the actual use and need of the community.
What's a typical nighttime parking time frame?
Anywhere between like 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Yeah, but all across the board, it just depends on the need of the community.
Thank you.
Can the city council create a parking zone without a 50% vote? I mean, the 51% vote is if residents get together and decide they want a parking.
Right, it's at least
Or a
51.
signature.
At least 51, yeah, and it's petitioners, right? And so it's people that living at the property, they would sign that, it would be at
But that's
least
the
51.
only way into the program. The council couldn't, laterally decide, I think we need a parking.
So there are cities that have a resident-initiated petition, but also city council or cities can also establish their own parking permit zones as well. And so we can include that into the Muni Code update. It's just up to what the city really wants.
Okay. Did you look at the city of Del Mar uses, I think they call them rangers, but they basically have their own parking enforcement. And how does that compare as a cost to outsourcing it? You seem very excited about, or not excited, but adamant to outsource.
So we have a client it's Northern California, up in San Leandro. A parking enforcement officer, they have to allocate about $150,000 per year just for a parking enforcement officer. So I imagine in Del Mar and Encinitas probably a little bit more, which is why it makes a lot of sense to outsource that, because you recognize a ton of savings outsourcing enforcement as opposed to having internal employees enforcing that. And then also, when you do outsource parking enforcement, they're the ones that supply the vehicles, right? And so it comes all within the package. You would have to purchase vehicles, you'd have to pay, wages to employee wages, and that's not cheap, right? And you could probably have 2 parking enforcement officers. You're probably paying at least $300,000 in terms of, salary, benefits, et cetera.
Who would control the app? Is that still a city-owned app?
Not
or
necessarily.
website?
So there are vendors. There's 2 really big vendors in the state of California. I don't want to say who they are, but they're really adept at permits and also citations as well. And so you can have that vendor handle both the citation side of it and the permit side of it. The cost for these vendors, it's not terribly expensive, right? And so what they would do, they would also work with enforcement. So everything's all integrated. They all tie in with each other. But that's probably the best plan of attack for the city that we would recommend.
If someone pays for a permit, does that money go to this private party first, and then they tell the city, hey, we issued so many permits this year, here's your revenue? Or is it going to the city first, and then we pay an invoice to the parking enforcement?
It depends. It's all something called the merchant of record. If the city's a merchant of record, they get the revenue first. If the vendor's a merchant of record, they would get the revenue, then reconcile that on a monthly basis over to the city.
Okay. Is this only relating to parking permits associated with a license plate number, not like parking meters? Are parking meters a part of a permit area in any scenario?
So City of San Diego does have a hybrid zone, so where you can pay for 2-hour parking, but if you have a permit, you're exempt from paying, right? And so this is in the Cortez area of City of San Diego. So you can have standalone RPP zones, but you can also have hybrid zones, because there's a lot of hybrid zones that are really close to commercial corridors and residential corridors and really adjacent to it. So yeah, so you could have a hybrid zone where you have parking meters. And if you're exempt from using the parking meters because you have a permit, that's great. But if people want to come and enjoy downtown, they can pay, however much money for 2-hour parking.
Okay. Could you also, there was some discussion in there about the Attorney General's opinion that, and I can't quote you the opinion, but could you address or just talk about that issue a little bit?
Yeah, so
is this making a distinction between renters of an apartment building and homeowners in a single family house?
Yeah, so this is the Attorney General's opinion of 2016, where you can't differentiate between a multifamily home and a single family home. So meaning if you need to offer 4 permits to a single family home, you also have to offer 4 permits to a multifamily home. So you can't make that distinction. And that just came out a few years ago, and a lot of cities are abiding by that.
Okay.
Okay, so just to clarify, so that would mean like a single-family home that has 2 separate families living within the one home?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Could, I think I saw in there that there's going to be this vote of whether to enact it. An apartment owner owns an apartment building. He gets, or that person gets one vote about whether or not to enact a parking. But if it's a condominium project, then each individual homeowner in that complex gets a vote?
Correct. That's how it would be set up.
Okay.
So if there's 100 units in the apartment complex, there's not a potential for 400 permits, 4 cars per unit?
Well, there is.
There is.
There is.
So they only get to vote once if they want it or not want it. I'm just talking about only just whether you implement a zone or not.
Right.
They would get one vote.
So then let's assume that
one signature.
the owner of the 100-unit apartment complex says yes, because he's 100%, right? So does that mean everybody in that complex, because you can't distinguish a single-family home from an apartment complex, then each apartment unit of the 100 can get up to 4 each, so that means they get 400 street parking. Yes. Doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose?
But even if he didn't sign it, like even if he wasn't one of the 51% who signed it, and city council still approved it,
Right.
then they still would be eligible.
And then all of a
Right.
sudden, but how does that?
I know, I'm just saying that's.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. If the city council does it and he doesn't do it, but we now have 400
Yeah, let's go through those scenarios once we get to deliberation. I'm just trying to get some clarification. I get it. It's all mixed up, but there was also a section of the report, your draft report, that talked about private versus public permits. And it seemed like it was added at the request of maybe the traffic committee. Can you explain, or what that, it's on page 19 of 28, what that issue is and why it's added?
We're really just trying to drive home the point that there's a lot of off-street availability in a lot of these private developments, right? And so how do you make that work? We've had discussions with a lot of the community where they think that maybe that should be priced out the same or similar to on-street parking as part of the permit process. What we're trying to drive home the point is the fact that there's a lot of private developers that probably need to talk with the city a bit more about how they price their parking. Because it's my understanding that off-street parking availability, say in Zone 4, the resort, I don't know, there's probably 40% parking availability, maybe probably more than that. And there needs to be a deeper conversation between the private developers as well as the city to how to make this work. Because the reason or the catalyst behind the formation of Zone D was because a lot of people that were living in the apartments decided they didn't want to pay $100 a month to park. Of course, they're going to park in available free parking. This is prior to the permit zone was enacted. So it's really just painting a picture of, I think these apartment mega conglomerate owners really need to understand the impacts that they're having on the community.
Okay. I have a feeling we're going to want to come back to you, but I think I would like to open it up to public comments just to get some input from them, and then we can always ask further questions if we have. Okay? So with that, Dina, is there public speakers?
Excuse me. Yes, we have Bonnie Bobzine. Bonnie has a time donation from Denise Pogue. Thank you.
My name is Bonnie Bobzine, and I reside in Permit Parking Zone D. We are here to recommend enhancements to the new code provisions. Our recommendations are based on our over 2-year process to have Zone D established in our neighborhood, which includes 3 apartment complexes as well as single-family homes. Our experiences include those before permit parking was granted, the process of getting a permanent zone, and in life after a permanent zone was established. We also investigated 20 other California cities' permit parking programs to identify solutions to our neighborhood problems. Even though we may have our permanent zone, we are aware of the numerous new developments coming to Encinitas. We know that a revised code is sorely needed, and a revision will help neighborhoods impacted by new developments. We want to start by thanking Dixon Consultants for the current revision of the permit parking code. In August, we presented at the MTSC Commission multiple deficiencies we identified in that revision. You have addressed many of them. We are grateful for the attention the Dixon team gave to our concerns. We have some additional recommendations that will enhance the final revision. Our first recommendations involve precisely defining quality of life and adding quality of life to the intent of the program section. The definition the report uses under guiding principles is the most specific and is the definition we request to be used throughout the document, including in the definition section and added to the intent of the program section. The definition of quality of life in the guiding principles section refers to establishing a standardized process that aims to, quote, reduce parking congestion and associated issues such as noise, litter, traffic hazards, and illegal activities, end quote. This definition includes specific examples of what is meant by quality of life and clarifies the term's meaning. In the intent of the program section, permit parking is granted on the basis of inadequate parking capacity and not quality of life as defined under guiding principles. The intent of the program should include quality of life as defined in the guiding principles section. Our neighborhood's history shows why. Zones B, C, and D were established for quality of life issues other than merely parking capacity. The main reason our neighborhood, similar to zones B and C, were seeking permit parking was the numerous social problems caused by the sudden overflow of 80 to 100 vehicles from a nearby apartment complex onto our streets. This destroyed our quality of life. We had no problem with this apartment complex for 30-plus years. The influx of the vehicles from the nearby apartment complex began in 2021 with new owners by an out-of-town investment corporation. This new management ownership resulted in a drastic change in the character of our neighborhood. None of the social problems you're about to hear qualify future neighborhoods for permit parking under this revised code. Social problems associated with this influx of vehicles included parties late at night on our 4 streets with drunkenness, relentless trash comprised of beer bottles, food containers, used syringes, and used condoms, public urination and defecation, young men taunting women, fire hydrants being blocked, garbage cans moved. When an incident was reported to the sheriff, cars were keyed and headlights smashed. Resident cars parked in driveways were broken into and ransacked. As the intent of the program now written, a neighborhood experiencing these social problems would not qualify for permit parking. Don't you want future neighborhoods to be helped as we were? If quality of life is not added to the intent of the program, future neighborhoods will not be protected. Other cities offer protection to their neighborhoods. The Dixon draft focuses on problems caused by external parking demand in the intent of the program. As you have just heard, our problems involve an apartment complex within the neighborhood. The public was being harmed by this situation, and the sheriff tried to help, but all our problems continued. All other solutions we tried failed to end the harm being done. We consulted with the apartment management, sheriff, fire marshal, and commission and city council members. Permit parking was the only choice left. Many city officials, city documents, and citizens speak about the importance of preserving the character of Encinitas. Permit parking is a valuable tool in achieving this goal. In conclusion, we ask the definition of quality of life, as stated under guiding principles section, to be the same throughout all parts of the document and added to the intent of the program. We also ask that social programs arising from parking demand internal to the neighborhood be eligible for consideration for permit parking. Sandra Anderson will present the rest.
Okay, next, we have Sandra Anderson with a time donation from Scott Pogue. Scott, if you could raise your hand. Thank you. I'm like, wait, I already had a
My name is Sandra Anderson, and I live in Zone D also. And I'm going to continue on with other recommendations that we believe this new document that Dixon wrote needs to incorporate before it goes to City Council. So the second one that Bonnie talked about the first one, I'm going to talk about the second one. Clarifying petition rules for multifamily properties. It's on page 13. The Dixon report states that in rental complexes, the residents, property managers, and property owners should all be allowed to participate in the petition process. We agree with this, but we recommend additional clarification, which is the following. Require the property owner to first approve the establishment of a permit zone to include their apartment complex. If the owner approves, then the property manager and tenants participate in a petition survey. Other cities' programs have this requirement. The third one is the times when studies are performed for street occupancy by vehicles. It's on page 14 and 16. The document mentions that the hours of operation of the permit zone need to be adjusted on a case-by-case basis in neighborhoods. We wish to reinforce the importance of this statement. The times chosen for evaluating the parking capacity of a neighborhood matters. The selected time should be based on the problem times reported by the residents. For example, our permit zone D, our hours are from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. If the surveys are all performed before 10 p.m., the survey would miss the maximum parking usage in our neighborhood. Many vehicles arrive after 10 p.m. and start leaving around 5 a.m. We know this because we have conducted multiple parking surveys after 10 p.m. and as early as 4 a.m. in our neighborhood. Number 4, stiffer penalties for code violations, page 20 through 22. In the report, you make several recommendations regarding enforcement of a permit parking code. You mention on page 22, parking programs and restrictions are only effective if they are followed, so consistent parking enforcement is critical. Once again, we agree with this statement. We have witnessed the importance of enforcement in our permit zone. Vehicles without any permits will park continuously in the zone until we call the sheriff and have the vehicles ticketed. We would also like to see stiffer penalties for code violations. Penalties for violation of permit zone regulations currently consist of tickets. Additional penalties used by other cities include misdemeanor charges, as in San Diego, revoking of a resident's permit, as in San Diego, Huntington Beach, or persons not allowed to renew a permit until fines are paid, as in Berkeley. Number 5, the fee structure. It's on page 15, 17 through 18. Currently, our fee is only $5 for a lifelong resident pass for a vehicle. The resort apartment complex, which is in our zone, charges their tenants $25 annually for a vehicle in their private lot. As witnessed in other cities, as well as in our neighborhood, this causes apartment tenants to prefer to park their vehicles on the adjacent neighborhood streets rather than use the provided complex lot. This is confirmed by the 80 to 100 empty parking spaces we have tallied when serving the apartment complex at 4 in the morning, and we have photos of all of this. As stated in the Dixon report, the fees need to be increased and different pricing structures are necessary. We agree with this. The Dixon report suggests limiting permits to 1 permit per eligible resident with a max of up to 4 permits per household. In our zone, we have the Resort Complex, which has 195 units. We have the Ritz Complex, which has 144 units. And the Cape Complex has 66 units. We have 405 units. All three of these complexes are in Zone D. These apartment complexes already supply 2 on-site parking spaces per unit. 4 additional public street spaces would mean each of these 405 units would have available a total of 6 parking permits per unit, even if a studio apartment. Given the number of dwelling units in our zone, this seems an excessive and unnecessary number of permits per unit and encourages abuse of the permit system. Excess parking permits might be sold or given to those not legitimately entitled to a parking permit. We have experienced this abuse of parking permits. The Dixon report suggests 6 other cities' methods of establishing fees for residents and guest permits. After reviewing these alternative pricing structures, we recommend the fee structure used in Anaheim rather than an escalating fee structure. It is based on the number of permits per bedroom count. This would be equitable for apartment complex residents and single-family homeowners. I have one more thing, and I can get a donation from Wendy.
Yes, if you could
Okay.
wrap it up.
Number 6, my last one, provisions for large parties. The current guest pass system allows 3 guest passes per qualifying address per month. Residents have held an occasional large party for the holidays or friends gathering, and their guests receive parking citations. To deal with the occasional large guest party, Anaheim allows 100 daily guest passes per household per year, costing $1 each. This may be the easiest method for administrative purposes, and there needs to be a provision added to this for large parties for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Our last 2 speakers are first Karen Caden, followed by Dennis Caden.
Hi, Commission. Thank you for sitting here and listening and trying to help Encinitas out. I just want to say I was 9 months pregnant in 1986 and walked for incorporation. And I did not end there. And here I am at my age, and I'm still trying to help Encinitas and learning that caring about not just my street, but caring about the whole neighborhood in Encinitas. And I wasn't really going to come up and speak. I was going to give my time. I am a resident near Piraeus Point, one of the 15 sites. And we are also going to be concerned about parking in our neighborhood. And we are near the Bataguitos Lagoon, and we have narrow streets, and we have some safe walk to school where you cannot even park on the sidewalks. And someone brought up about, parking on the, dirt sidewalks, which is most likely maybe illegal too. We got to learn a lot from our police department. So I'm concerned also about the quality of life here. That's why I'm still around. The quality of life issues, congestion, safety, and don't forget about happiness. That's why we choose to live here in our neighborhoods. We are taxpayers, and we pay enough to help. Life Parking Action Plan acts as a menu of options for the people, us, to serve, to improve, to be enforced, and to protect the quality of life of our taxpayers. I agree with the Anaheim resident parking permit costs and the guest permits. I hope that you guys put a star next to that to push for our city council to look at some of the issues, and I respect the Molina group so much. They have done a lot of homework, probably more than our own traffic division, and I also want to thank Dixon I think they're a wonderful group that the city has hired. They did a massive process of allowing the people to participate, and I think they did a good job. We always can do more, and that's why we're here in front of you guys. I also want to mention, and we all know, auto vehicles are not going away. I haven't read any input from the fire department regarding safety and the width of streets, and I like clarity of the 1,500 feet and the 3 blocks. Thank you. Pirates Point may be more distant, so I hope we'll have some ways of changing what we're going to be doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Dennis Caden.
Good evening, Dennis Caden again. We have, good. Could you, are you able to zoom in on Olympus Street?
Which part
of? Any part of it. Let's do like the big curve where the loop is, like the top of the aorta. That'd be good. Okay, can you zoom in even greater than that? Perfect. Abe, thank you so much.
I'm going to the street if that's better for you.
No, the other way is better. Thanks. There you go. Okay, please. So I have a suggestion on R30s, and that is that they have a 30-foot buffer between each one of the driveways. And the reason is because probably with the R30s, you're going to have an abundance of traffic, or excuse me, people parking. And we have a lot of narrow, curvilinear streets. I'm thinking of Clark, and I'm thinking of the area for Piraeus Point. So look what they did wisely on Olympus Street because of so much people are trying to park because of the park. See where the red lines are between that driveway, so it's to the left and the right. And then on the entire other side, the northern side, there's no parking at all. That street's 33 feet wide. And I know that Clark and streets around the Piraeus Point are nowhere near that wide. So when somebody's trying to back out of their driveway, you could also limit to a green or a yellow area beyond the 20-foot so that no SUVs or large Sprinter vans would park to block the driveway as well. Does that make sense? That you could do that, right? If you're going to have a parking permit area, you can limit the size of the vehicle that's going to be right in front of your driveway. That's it, I think. Yeah. Does that make sense? Does it? Well, thanks. You guys can discuss it. I'll relinquish my time.
Thank you.
That's our final speaker.
Oh, okay, that's it. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the hearing and open it up to commissioner deliberations. I do think I'd like to kind of clarify a little bit about what's being asked of us tonight. So this is a document that's going to go to the city council. With our recommendations, do we need a motion for something, or do we just discuss it and then that discussion is relayed to them?
It's a discussion which they will be documenting, and so I would just be looking to the chair to get a consensus on the recommendations that you would like the staff to bring forward to city council. So no vote is necessary, just looking for a general consensus and information to provide them.
Okay. Where do we want to start?
I would say that recommendation 7 is a pretty good one, to have it be automated and per license plate. And I think that that way you could have differing time limits also, and it would all be automated. I think it's a lot easier for enforcement. It sounds like outsourcing might be the better way to go.
as it relates to outsourcing, I guess I'm nervous. I think there's and I can't cite the exact thing, but I think there was a case in Chicago where they outsourced their parking meters and it became just a complete boondoggle. So I'd want to be really cautious as a city that we maintained some control of the system, or that we retained some of the revenue generated by this system. I think what we're experiencing is that parking now has a value to it. Like we all think of parking as free on the street, and over time now there's a cost to parking, right? Whether we like it or not. I'd hope that the city at least is always going to maintain, recoup that cost to us, not pay it off to a private company. But I don't know the nuts and bolts of the contracts enough to say, but I just want to express I have some concerns about privatizing it.
I also have concerns about privatizing it too, because I'm concerned about controlling the cost of outsourcing it. And I think that was pretty clear from some of my questions, because Encinitas does not have a lot of money. And every time I go to a city council meeting and I see people fighting over the same pot of money for improvements in their neighborhoods and their streets and infrastructure, I, see that we're not flush with money. We don't have a lot of ways to raise additional revenues because we're mostly a residential community. So I am hesitant to recommend anything that we can't maintain control over when it comes to the cost.
I didn't understand that outsourcing would cost more. I thought it would be paid for by the fees.
Right, but I think
and fines.
We'd be entering into a contract probably. So we'd have a contract that we'd have to pay X amount of dollars for the enforcement, and that we may or may not be able to recoup from the permit fees and from citations.
What about including a $5 fee in another wrapped into property tax or some other fee structure that everyone already pays, either their water or something that everybody pays already, that would cover parking, so that we are sure we get that money so that we can afford the outsourcing?
Yeah, but that's a regressive tax, and we just voted down a tax increase in the city. Well, I don't know for sure, but I think it didn't pass the other day. So to your point, Commissioner, there's a finite pot of money. I'll have to let the city council decide on what's the best economic function to it. I wrestle with how do we, I go back to my prior deliberation, the 100-unit conversation, like there's a 100-unit apartment complex, that's 400 cars. And we can't force the people to park and pay the $50 in the apartment complex. Some apartment complexes, based on state law that are transit-oriented development, can build an apartment complex without any parking. I think that's also a state law. Maybe our attorney can confirm that. So there could be apartment complexes built in our city that have zero parking, and the developers are allowed to do that. That's going to put parking into the streets. Where else can you go, right? Not everybody takes the train or the bus to work. So, but establishing, I don't know if there's enough parking stalls in the city to accommodate all of the uses, whether it's an apartment complex or a single-family home next to an apartment complex. At some point, we're building so many units. If we implement a plan like this and the apartment owner does it, there's 100 more people that are eligible for a parking pass. That just puts more people into the street. Am I wrong? I mean,
I share some of the uncertainty. I mean,
yeah. I don't know if it's a deliberation. I'm just, is my thinking wrong? If no one wants to park in the complex and the city is allowed, because we had this conversation before specifically about Molina, that is city property and not personal property. So people have the right to park there, whether they're in the apartment complex or not. Right?
Right, but they'd have a right to park there if there's not a parking permit system, they'd have the right to park there because it's a public street. So I guess now, if you have a permit parking, they still have the right, but they have to pay something,
Yeah, right.
right? So there is revenue.
I think the next step in that link, which is difficult, and there was some discussion about coordinating with private property owners, that they're not charging, and they're charging too much for parking, and so it's pushing people out to the street. I think it's very difficult to coordinate. How would you, as a city, start to interfere with the market rate of what parking costs? You know, I mean, we'd have to raise our parking permits on the street to a substantial amount to be competitive, or, you know, to force them back into private lots. And I don't know what the mechanism to go to a private property owner and says you can only charge so much for parking. You know, like if we're going to charge $25 for a permit, how do we insist that they only charge $25 for a? I think it's very difficult.
It's almost a circular, argument, and that's a great question. I understand the need, and I respect the report and the need to have something. I'm just kind of at a loss, honestly, because it just gets into this nested loop of just back and just going around and around and around. And now we're putting a price on parking throughout the entire city, right? This is, in essence, a parking spot in front of my house is now worth $25. And if I can pay the $25 to park my car in front of my house, which the city is saying you're going to have to, right? Where the entire city, everybody parks, just for discussion purposes, everybody in the city can park in front of their house. This gets passed, effectively, everybody in the city has to pay $25 to park in front of their house. Is that right?
It's only people that have the city, where the zone where the city council has approved it.
Right.
Yeah, but
To your point, the city council they waved their Harry Potter wand,
Right.
you know, and now there's a parking zone everywhere, which they can do.
Right, so you could be a person who wasn't one of the 51% of people in your neighborhood who signed it, and then it gets passed, and now if you want to park a car in the street, you have to pay it.
Yeah.
So, right.
That
right.
can happen.
It
That
can.
could be the result of all of this, or
Yes.
it could not be. I mean, but it could be.
Right, and there's a good argument as to why should I now have to pay $25 to park in front of my house when I never wanted it from the beginning?
Right. And I guess it could say that, well, because the city council deemed it necessary and they're your representatives, so that's the way it was going to work in Encinitas, right? So whether we agree to this or not, it can still just happen, right? Okay.
I live in a permit parking zone.
Or you have to recuse yourself.
So it's not incorporated in one of the four here, or is it projected to be an additional one or anything like that? But I can tell you parking permitting is difficult. It's complicated, it's time consuming, it's costly. And I certainly appreciated the public comments that were provided regarding the zones that are there, and regarding the quality of life. That language definitely should be forefront. It definitely is. It should be addressed. And the issues regarding multifamily units. I mean, they were requesting rules and specific guidelines for dealing with those. You can create payment structures and fee structures based on whether or not an area is including one or whether it's not. And so it can be adjusted to address those issues. They could outline that more effectively, I think, for the city council. That might be helpful. Certainly the penalties for violations, it needs to be, significant, because it will be an endless attempt to try to circumvent the regulations. And so whatever can be done to increase the violations is, should be presented, definitely.
So I actually, when it comes to quality of life, I don't think it really necessarily has a place in the capacity determination section, which is where it would have to be. It'd have to be included somewhere in the capacity. You got the 51%, now you're doing the capacity study. The problem with the quality of life is that you can't quantify it in some way. Like you can quantify the number of cars that are parked there at a particular time of day. So I would actually not support adding quality of life to the document in that way.
But what about having quality of life be in terms of the validity of a permit, such as your permit allows you to park your car, but not sleep in your car. Your permit allows you to park your car, but not have a picnic in the car, so that they can't leave garbage after, and so on. I mean, couldn't there be certain rules
Then you're getting into a lot
that
of
are
other
associated with
social
the permit?
issues.
They were even discussing, sizes of vehicles and those types of things. That affects quality of life. If they're parking large vehicles in front of, structures that have views to that location, and that involves quality of life.
Right, and I do think I think size restrictions, but you can quantify a size restriction, right? So I think I think it has to be something that's quantifiable in order to have a place in the capacity calculations.
But you're okay on the guiding principles, but it's hard to quantify it. So at that section of the quantifying A, B, C,
Right.
D, it's hard for it to go there.
Right, but I think that's something that city council, let's say you get the 51% and then they do the capacity calculations and now it goes to city council. Quality of life is something that certainly the city council could think about when they decide whether or not they're wanting to give the permits. So I think it really belongs in the city council kind of section. Does that make sense?
It does. It also, when the organization in Area D, who's here tonight, some of the representatives, that was a big part of it. A big part of it was some of the issues that they described that were unique to their situation, that was unique to, I don't recall the other parking permit RPP zones that were A, B, and C, but for D, it was definitely an issue. And I think it was part of my deliberation to agree to it at the time, because it seemed to be a unique situation that needed some kind of fix.
And I think city council did take it into account when they made their decision. I remember it being a big part of their deliberations.
Also, having it sourced out to a private organization, there should definitely also be incorporated some sort of a community involvement in the parking situation. I know issues that we've managed in our parking area is certainly it was the residents that live there that helped facilitate the enforcement or help facilitate any changes that needed to be made or updates that needed to be made. So if we could feed that back in, instead of every time there's an issue, it always going to the sheriff, it could also, or maybe preliminarily be sent to, an enforcement agency.
So I'm going to speak really quickly. I do support increased fees for a number of permits. A lot of the communities we're talking about who might want to get a permit also have off-street parking available too. So they have garages, they have driveways, and of course now they can also park in the street. But I do think that it would also maybe encourage people to do more driveway and garage parking as well in order to free up some more space on the streets.
Yeah, I think that was one of my questions for our group is how many parking permits per household? I think the suggestion is 4, but does that accommodate a 2-car garage and parking? I guess.
I like the idea of basing it on the number of bedrooms and the one municipality showed.
So would that be for a single-family house or would it be for the apartments?
Still based on the number of bedrooms.
I guess have to be on both. If the Attorney General's reading is an apartment is the same as a house, then the bedrooms is a consistent.
Yeah.
To Chris's
Except
point.
if you have a one-bedroom apartment with a couple living there, and they each want a car to be able to park it, then you only get 1 permit.
Or you say 2 per bedroom, but then if
see
you have
what
a
I'm saying?
3-bedroom house, you got 6 permits.
It's 6, and now that goes back to my apartment complex, and now everybody can park anywhere, and that kind of defeats the purpose. So,
Excuse me, Chair, if Scott might be able to help, but I do remember reading through the Attorney General's recommendation the core of the ruling was this non-discriminatory decisions by the cities. I see two concerns with using bedrooms. One is that we're basically giving more value to higher value properties with more bedrooms and basically larger sizes. Apartments or houses will get more from the public resources available, basically the street surface. That's on the discrimination side, which again, I'll defer to our attorney. If that definition would kind of translate into we're basically giving more of our streets to bigger houses. The second one is the operational side. I'm concerned about city staff or the processing of it. How are we going to identify, I mean, short of going onto Zillow or Redfin based on their addresses and finding out how many bedrooms their property has, there's no mechanism that I can think of to identify really how many bedrooms each property
I'd be curious for that opinion, because it does seem like a one-bedroom apartment with 4 parking stalls is not the same as a 5-bedroom house with 4 parking permits.
And also, just when we're talking about discrimination, I mean, the reality is, even in our community, there are families who we're members of the family who drive and have a car, or maybe even a whole family lives in the living room with another family living in the bedroom. I mean, that exists. I see that every day in my job. So we'd be very much discriminating against households that have an entire family that sleeps in the living room.
So
Because-
do you think, I'm sorry, can we get a quick?
Sure. So 2 issues. Number one is all California Attorney General opinions are just that. They're opinions. They're not law. Certainly they're guiding principles, and courts tend to give them weight, but they're just persuasive evidence, and a court can overrule them. So that said, the opinion says that you can't discriminate based on the type of structure that it is. Well, but you can't. It doesn't say that you can't do it on some other basis, such as the number of bedrooms. I don't see an issue. I don't see that being contrary to this. So there, one potential solution to what you're referring to is the concern was, well, maybe you could have a minimum threshold. So you could say you always get at least 2 parking permits on the street, and then after that, then it's based on the number of bedrooms. So there's another way to cut the apple if that's what you want to do.
I can appreciate that it might be an administrative nightmare to try to figure out which units are 3-bedroom and which ones are 1-bedroom and all of that. But a bedroom does seem like a fairly universal unit.
That's why it'd be a lot easier to wrap it into some other annual fee, something that people pay anyway. Wrap it into either their water fee or their electric fee or whatever it is. You know, something they're already paying every month or annually. Property tax is easiest.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to support adding a tax to it, a citywide tax. I think that might fall more like just in how we set the rate, right? I mean, there's some discussion in here, I think, of what the parking fee should be, or it gives some comparisons to other cities. And
Maybe it could be like when you sign up for water service and there's an extra checkbox. If you want the parking permit, you check it and you pay that extra fee. Something like that. Something that makes it, you want to make it so that it's very easy for anybody who lives in the city to at least get that first parking permit if they want it. And some people won't want it or need it.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of seniors who live in a big old house, and they have a 2-car garage and a driveway, and maybe they have 2 vehicles or even 3, but they already have plenty of off-street parking.
So
they're not going to need it. But for other people, everyone uses water, so something like that where you just have an extra checkbox so you can at least get that 1 permit for parking in an easy way, and then the city gets the money back or somehow from the, from the utility.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm not feeling a lot of support for that concept.
I think it was a great try.
Just trying to think about something that would be easy.
Well,
Easy for the resident, easy for the city, and that would be equitable in terms of accessible to anybody that's a resident, because we're looking after our residents. But the whole idea of their recommendation number 7, having it be something that's automated,
I think that's
makes
where
it
the app-
easy for visitors.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm rereading the Attorney General opinion. I'm not sure that what I said was correct. It gives the specific example. It says you cannot discriminate based on, I could get these, like, you can't discriminate based on what structure they live in, and it gives an example, such as you can't discriminate between single family and multifamily.
Right.
So does that include bedrooms? I don't know. So
How about, let's just say, how about this example? And I don't know if the report does it, but I have a house, and I have a 2-car garage, and I have a driveway. So collectively, that's 3 cars, 4, right? Yeah, 2 and 2, right? So if I have a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house, I guess I could collectively have 6. So I could get only 2 parking permits, not 6 parking permits. So, and if I'm in an apartment building who has it's a 100-unit apartment complex and there's 100 stalls, can we deduct the eligible stalls that are on the property, so you don't get to park all of your cars on the street? You can only get to park the extra car on your street, and that would then limit the total number of car permits out there, because my 3-bedroom house doesn't get 6 parking permits on the street because if I have 3 bedrooms times 2 or times 1, but subtract the existing locations that I have, and if my garage is full of crap, then sorry, your car should park there, not on the street.
I see where you're going. I kind of agree with that approach, but I think it's problematic when you get to the apartment user who doesn't get to control whether the garage is, like, if there's only, a parking for half the apartments and they're they're occupied by other, apartments, you don't get the choice of clearing out your garage so that you can park your car. You just never had an opportunity to park on your site.
Okay, but per some of our prior conversations, but specifically, that's a market force. As a renter, I can choose not to rent that apartment complex because they're charging me $50. It's not $100 for my rent, it's $150 because I have to pay for parking.
I'm kind of going back to this Attorney General. I think you're making a distinction between if you're a renter or an apartment dweller,
right,
you can participate differently in this program than if you're a single family homeowner.
But if I'm in an apartment complex and there's 2 stalls allocated to my unit and I choose not to pay the $50.
No, but there's going to be an apartment building that doesn't have any stalls allocated to your unit.
This is true, and we haven't had any of those yet.
Well, you have. You just haven't. I mean, anytime a R30 site comes in and says we're going to park, at the density bonus ratios of half a space per bedroom, or there's some.
Yes.
There are reduced parking standards coming and are here,
and those will force people if they have a car to the street.
That means that there will be apartments that have no option to rent a parking stall on site.
Well, as a renter, maybe you shouldn't rent there, and that's a market force. So we should let.
But I think in my opinion, my opinion of the Attorney General's opinion is that you would say that renter should have the same access to buying a permit for the street as a homeowner has access to buying a permit.
I get it. Yeah.
If I may, I'm just trying to make sure that whatever is going to be concluded in the discussion here, I think it started with the 4 permits. There's a disagreement, and I'm hearing that there's a recommendation that it should be considered further to consider alternative options. Is that the direction you're looking for, Abe? I just want to be clear on what you're looking for from the commission, because it sounds like they're trying to come up with a plan, but is there more to do? Like if they're stating their dissatisfaction with that, it's really recommending that that be looked in further and.
Yeah,
is
that certainly can
appropriate,
go
or-
into the motion of the commission. What we will do, or what will Dixon do, I think, would be look into other options. If they don't find any other solution, they'll just take the 4 per unit to council with clearly expressing the fact that planning commission felt like there should be a different approach to this, but this is still our opinion.
Okay. That may help us also move through that. We don't have to solve the issues. We can express where our concerns are
Exactly.
and let the professional
consultant.
Go solve it. Okay. Let me, just to recap, I have 5 issues that we've talked about, and maybe we can do a quick raising of hands to see where we have consensus on these things. But the first thing on my list was the number of permits per household. We were just talking about it. There seems to be some concern about, well, is there concern about having 4 available per household, or should there be some accommodation or some factoring of required parking, say a 2-car garage for a single-family house?
Or multifamily dwellings using all of their parking first before providing permits on the street.
Or at least part of the calculation.
Okay. Okay, so maybe just to stay at a very broad level, to say there's some concern about the number of parking stalls. I keep thinking every time we start to try to solve it, I run into problems with the opinion and equal access.
Right, so maybe the consultant can think about our concerns here and see if they can come up with an idea that maybe does sort of push some people into their garages and driveways. It doesn't discriminate against them. It also doesn't discriminate against multifamily or people in apartments.
Yeah, we can certainly investigate other best practices that might be outside of what we're recommending and see if we can come to some newer ideas that might work for everybody. We can look into that for sure.
Okay, if I get a head nod from most people. Okay. The second item that is kind of related to that in my list was the pricing of permits, the public permits versus private permits. And I find that very problematic to think that we would coordinate or dictate to private property owners what they can or can't charge. And I might say the reverse is almost true. Instead of the city coming in and trying to artificially lower the value of parking, if the apartment tenant, the private property owner has already established that they can easily get $100 a month for parking, why isn't the city then charging $100 a month, or something more for the permits? And stopping short of establishing what the value is, I would think, is there a general consensus that there's maybe some clarity that needs to be brought around parking fees, permit fees?
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, because clearly in Zone D, when there's 496 apartment units, parking's at a premium. In Levenheim, it's probably not.
Yeah.
So now we are looking at different zones and different, because of density, there has to maybe be some allocation based on urban density, a number of units per mile, or whatever the calculation could be, but clearly less so in less dense locations, and wow, a different value associated. I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to commercial properties, parking downtown is $200 a stall, and it's free in Mission Valley. So
Right.
there's a price, there's a premium associated with location.
Right. The next item on my list was the quality of life definition and whether that should be used as a determinant of whether a parking permit zone. I shared some concerns that quality of life seems a bit subjective and difficult to use as a measuring rod, though it could certainly be a consideration. I would think the city council will always, has their own discretion to use it as a consideration. But I do think a qualitative measurement of parking capacity on the street would be kind of the criteria for establishing this.
I agree. I think criteria that are measurable are a lot better.
we talked about outsourcing, and I think there was some concern that the city not be taken, and not being part of the negotiation and the contract and how these things are set up. I've expressed some concern that there could be bad deals for the city where that revenue is not coming back to the city, it's just going to a private party.
Quick question. City has parking enforcement currently, does it not?
Yes.
So
Yes.
couldn't it just be expanded to include this?
Okay, so I think as far as it relates to just giving direction to the consultant, I think we're having some consensus that we don't agree as wholeheartedly that outsourcing is the best solution. Not that it might not end up being the solution, but I think a serious evaluation.
But don't
of
we
it.
already outsource enforcement? We don't have city staff,
No, we do.
do we?
Don't.
We have a contract. We have a contract with the.
So just to clarify.
We do outsource already.
But
So
to-
it
but
would
to our
just be
sheriff.
similar.
We-
It would just
we
be
outsource our
expanding
entire law
that.
enforcement.
It's one of the duties of, part of the contract with the sheriff's department.
Yes, our current permit parking zones are enforced by our sheriff's department. The outsourced contract that we have currently is only for a specific area of the city in downtown. That obviously can be expanded. We can increase the scope of the contract that we have. I think it's with ACE, but currently our permit parking zones are only enforced by our sheriff's department.
It seems easier to work with what you already have and expand.
Okay, that was my list of what we've talked about. Just to hit on a couple items brought up by the public, and we'll see if we have consensus around any of those. There was some discussion about large parties, issuing 100 guest permits, parking permits for a party. I mean,
Definitely don't think the system of adding license plates on your computer for guests will work for a large party. Like, I can't imagine anybody sitting down and putting in 100 license plates.
right.
I mean,
But I got the sense, and I might be completely wrong, I probably am. There's two different things. There's a resident permit that you associate with your license plate, and you pay annually for that. And then through this app, there's an opportunity to buy a one-time guest permit that would allow them to be there for the day. And is that based on their license plate as well?
Correct.
Okay, so each of your guests is going to be downloading an app and going, oh, what was my license plate number?
I really want to go to this party.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do think there needs to be some mechanism. I don't know what the mechanism
Sure.
is.
There should be something to
a-
accommodate a group.
There could be a physical mechanism where the city approves it, they could print out parking passes on,
Right.
for a big party or something like
Right.
that.
Pink
And-
passes for
they don't
the-
happen all the time, but it'd probably be a lot easier than inputting 100 license plates into a system. I get that.
Okay. The fee structure, I think we've talked about fee structure. I like the one element I saw that the second permit is more expensive than the first permit and then progressively more. Stiffer penalties, I think I would nod my head that we'd want to make sure that there was enough teeth in the rules. Multifamily property petition rules. I think this had to do with how a zone was established, and I guess I was it seemed a little unfair that the property owner that has 400 units gets one vote or one signature, and the condo project that has 400 units gets 400 signatures, but 201, right?
51%.
51%. So,
Yeah, that's a good point, because we're dealing with the number of units, I think, at the end of the day. A number of units, multiplied by the number of bedrooms equals X. So you're right. But I don't know how that works with the attorney.
Well, to be honest, and kind of brutally honest, if affordable housing is about generational wealth building, then the people who own should get a higher benefit than people who rent, to encourage ownership and to encourage wealth building. In my opinion, it's not wrong for a renter to have to use the bus and ride a bike as an incentive for them to become an owner instead. I don't know.
I disagree
know,
with the
you know.
application of that. I mean, I'm certainly in favor of home ownership, and I think it has been a great financial benefit to me that I've owned a house. But I don't think I'd go as far as to say that then if you're a renter, you should be penalized in some way for not getting a vote to whether parking.
Anyone couldn't still get a permit, right, from the pay machine?
Yeah. What? So who's part of the 51% to establish whether it even goes to the city council?
It would be anybody that lives within a proposed zone.
Okay.
So it could be an owner, it could be a tenant, it could be a renter.
Okay, so then where is the language that says that the owner of an apartment building gets one vote versus the condo got a vote for every resident? I wrote it on,
And that's certainly, I mean, that certainly can be updated, but.
on page 13 of 28 on the staff report. I believe there's language in there that I read to at least imply that the the apartment owner got one vote in the petition.
So we can clarify that to include owner,
And
resident.
residents.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Make it more inclusive to where owner doesn't, have
Okay, that would solve all my
It's
consternation.
One signature, yes, for the yes, it's in the last paragraph. Clarify the petition rules for multifamily properties. The bottom, you're right.
Okay. Are we nearing the end of the list? Okay. Does that give you the feedback that you were hoping, or enough feedback to go and work on your report further?
No, this is exactly what we were after.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we got a ton of really good information from Traffic and Safety Committee and really good information from you and as well as the community. So we will incorporate those changes into the report, and then we'll come back to council with a updated report.
Just to say it explicitly and not to, in my notes, and I don't know, I think there was some part of this discussion was relating to how do you ensure that residents park on site first before going to off-site parking?
That was me. Again, if you have room on your property, you have your two-car garage and your 2 spots in front of your garage.
Right.
As a homeowner, now, you make a very good point when you apply this to the apartment complex. But step one was like, well, maybe you should be limited to the amount of on-street parking because you have parking on your site. So why do you get off-street parking if you can park on site? You choose to not use it, well, then that's your choice. Next level is, okay, apartment complex, 100 units, 100 parking stalls because the developer built it. You choose to rent there, but you only have 1 stall, so you alternatively have to park on the street. Well, how do I do that? This allows you the ability to legally park on the street because the apartment complex number of units is taken into consideration. So if there's 200 stalls available, but 100 stalls are on site, well, then you're only going to be able to get permits for 100 on the street.
Right.
Okay, and I guess that says, well, you still can park. Well, you choose not to. You choose not to pay the $50 or the $100. Well, then maybe you should not rent there because you can't afford to do so, or maybe that doesn't accommodate your lifestyle because you have 2 cars. That is your choice.
And this goes back to the point of maybe the cost for the permits should approach or be similar to what the apartment complexes are charging.
That's
Right.
an excellent supply-demand economic calculation that why should the city be at a discount to what a private cost is? And so maybe that would then encourage you to park on site because it's going to cost you the same amount off-sites. I don't know how you keep track of all that because parking costs change every month.
If you have the automated system and you enter your address, then it would sort of keep track of it for you.
Okay, so not to get into the sausage making, but I think there has been some consensus around something that addresses the use of private parking first as some limitation of how many permits are available to a household. Yeah, I think we're all kind of not knowing how to answer it, but yes, we all have the concern. Okay, with that, I think I will close this item and move on to the next.
Thank you.
So I'd appreciate you guys coming and sharing your information. Okay, the next item on our agenda is future agenda items added by planning commissioners. Is there any future agenda items? No? Okay. Are there any planning commission reports? I think we only have one subcommittee.
I got a little absorbed into the events of the last couple weeks and did not have a chance to meet with my fellow subcommittee member. Hopefully the things will calm down and we'll have a little more mental capacity to attend to our subcommittee responsibilities.
Okay. I will recommend a book. I mentioned it to Susan last week called Soft City, which I think is a really good book about housing types and urbanism principles. So for you that want a technical read, it's out there.
Thank you. Is it
It's
on
well
audio? Is it
illustrated.
on audio or?
Yeah. Okay. Secretary reports.
Yes, the La Costa appeal was denied at City Council, and I think I already mentioned that the Quil Meadows project was appealed, and that will be heard on November 20th.
Which one was denied?
La Costa 48 appeal.
Oh, okay.
And then the Bella Vista project appeal was appealed, and then the Camino Apartments was appealed. Those are estimated to be going on December 11th. And Torrey Crest appeal will be going on November 13th. And then our next hearing is the mobility element, and the draft mobility element and analysis guidelines are on our website already, but the staff report will be posted next week. But if you wanted to take a look at it ahead of time, it is on our mobility element webpage.
Can I ask a question about two of the other projects?
Yes,
We
of course.
voted on whether or not they were appealed. When was the other one on La Costa next to the gas station?
It was the hotel.
Yeah, the hotel?
Yeah, it did not get appealed
Okay.
for City Council or the Coastal Commission.
Okay, and the other one was, this was kind of a longer time ago, but it was the one that was down across from the park, from Leucadia Oaks Park. It was a smaller project in Leucadia. Do you remember that one? It was right across from the, kind of right across from the park on Vulcan.
Across from the park on Vulcan.
Yeah, across from Leucadia Oaks Park.
Visualize it. Let me see.
Do you remember which one it was? All the houses went like straight back from the street.
Yeah.
Had the curvy.
There's a curve,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
had some site issues coming out of the driveway.
Or there's
and
like a little corner of land that's not theirs.
it was like an 8-unit complex, was it not? It wasn't a big
It
one.
wasn't very big, but I'm just curious.
8 to 10 units. Snapdragon? No.
No.
What's the street?
Sorry, you said it was across from where?
From Leucadia Oaks Park.
Oh, the Sanford?
Sanford.
yeah.
It had an S. That's
Oh,
right.
okay. Yes, I'm not sure exactly where it is in the process, but there were no
No appeal?
appeals or
Okay.
anything. Yeah. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Wait. Any R30 Sage? Can we ask about like Sage Canyon? That went away. Is that coming back
Sage
or?
Canyon has submitted a new application that is still in review,
Okay.
but will be before the Planning Commission. Timing-wise, I couldn't tell you right now.
All right,
Is
that
that the last R30?
That is the last R30 that is in process. The remaining R30 sites, there's been no contact made with those property owners, so there has not been interest yet for submitting any application.
Does that include Clark? I had to recuse myself from Clark, so I don't know what the Is that still out there?
Clark is still there. There is an appeal for an extension that was requested. That is a staff level decision. That's why I didn't mention it, but that one is also going to city council. I believe that one is also on the 13th. Yes, November 13th.
Oh, busy council. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting until the next regular Planning Commission meeting on November 21st. We'll see you there.
Our goal is to plan for